Chapter 1067. The sunlight shot into the house like an arrow, and the fire soared to the sky. It was as high as the morning sun. Zhang Xiaohua suddenly opened his eyes. There was no emotion in his eyes. Then, his eyelids moved, and a ray of golden light flashed from his eyes. Where am I? Zhang Xiaohua frowned slightly. Before he could figure out where he was, he felt a throbbing in his heart. Second brother? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked, but he used his divine sense to scan outside. He immediately became angry. Zhang Xiaohua didn't do anything, but his body soared to the sky. With a loud bang, the roof of the house was immediately broken. Little Black and Little Yellow also flew out of the hole in the roof, but they were extremely confused. They didn't know why their father or mother were so angry. What is that? The bandits of Shizue Mountain, who had been standing outside the Zhang family's courtyard and were about to get on their horses, were shocked by the sudden sound. They all looked back naturally. They saw Zhang Xiaohua's slender figure flying into the air. He raised his hand, and the 9-grade lotus throne floated in the air. He didn't make any gestures, but a ray of colorful Buddha's light shone down from the lotus throne, covering the entire Zhang family's courtyard. The burning fire was gradually extinguished in the light of Buddha's light, and there wasn't even a wisp of smoke left. Mother, father, brother, sister-in-law? Zhang Xiaohua shouted in the air. Xiaohua. Guosufei and others saw that the fire was extinguished and heard their son's voice. They were so happy that they cried and wanted to come out of the house. But at this time, the door of the house was tightly locked by a bronze lock. The 5 of them couldn't open it no matter how hard they tried. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes flashed fiercely. He stretched out his hand and used Chasing Dream. Shua. The bronze lock was cut off. Guosufei, Zhang Kai, and others rushed out of the house. When they saw Zhang Xiaohua flying in the air, they were all stunned. Lu Qian woke up the fastest. She shouted Byron and rushed to the house as fast as she could. Big brother, what's going on? Zhang Xiaohua shouted in the air, but then she sneered. No need, big brother, let me ask them. The bandits of Shizue Mountain were scared silly. It was only after Zhang Xiaohua released them that they realized what was going on. The boss had circled around his horse, and without saying a word, he turned his horse around and ran away. When the other dozens of people saw this, they all wished they could get on their 6-legged horses and flee in all directions. Ha ha ha, do you think you can escape? Zhang Xiaohua was so angry that she laughed. Zhang Xiaohua's Chasing Dream danced rapidly. Under Zhang Xiaohua's rage, it did not stop at all. Dozens of people. How could dozens of people who didn't even know the basics of Qinggong be a match for the immortal Dao Imperial Sword technique? In the time it took for Zhang Xiaolong and Ji Xiaohua to run out of the courtyard and onto the street, their throats were pierced by Zhu Meng's sword. They couldn't be more dead. At this moment, Little Black and Little Yellow followed behind the flying sword. They wanted to do something, but was there any use for them now? Then, Zhang Xiaohua frowned. The flying sword rose again and stabbed the dozens of horses to death. Only then did she fly to the entrance of the village. At this time, the boss who was the first to run away had been stabbed by Zhang Xiaohua's flying sword. He still had a breath of life left. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua flying over, he tried his best to dodge, but he didn't have the strength. He wanted to beg for mercy, but all he spat out was blood. Zhang Xiaohua landed on the ground. Her face was as cold as ice. She stretched out her hand and used Ecstasy Finger. She put her ear next to the boss's ear. Unfortunately, the boss couldn't say a complete sentence. After listening a few times, he could only say Shizue Mountain clearly. Zhang Xiaohua lifted her leg and kicked the boss's head. The guy's head tilted and he stopped breathing. Xiaohua, take this guy's gold and jewels back to the central room. Yes, young master. Xiaohua Ji was a little scared, but also a little in awe. There was a little eagerness in her eyes. She slowly walked to the boss's side. Zhang Xiaolong was also stunned. The little brother that he had carried since he was young was actually flying in the air. Moreover, with a few white lights that couldn't be seen clearly, dozens of people and dozens of horses were assassinated. And that kick just now was even more handsome. Seeing that Xiaohua Ji was a little slow, Zhang Xiaolong woke up and shouted, "Quick, The villagers will come out soon. Why are you still not moving? Zhang Xiaolong wasn't afraid of Zhang Xiaohua. He took big strides and took all the things from the horses and the boss's body. Both of their hands were full. Forget it. Let me do it. Zhang Xiaohua walked forward. She stretched out her hand and put all the things into her belt. Then, she threw out 2 jade talismans and set the boss's body and the horse's body on fire. After that, Zhang Xiaohua let Zhang Xiaolong and Ji Xiaohua go home first. She took all the things that the bandits took and burned all the corpses. Then, she walked back to the Zhang family with a solemn face. At this time, the Zhang family's house was overflowing with colorful lights. The Buddhist light protected the courtyard tightly. Zhang Xiaohua stretched out her hand, and the 9-grade lotus throne slowly shrank and went into the money bag. Guosufei, Zhang Kai, and the rest, as well as Lu Qian, who was carrying Zhang Byron, were all standing in the courtyard in a daze. She knew that her son knew some martial arts, but she didn't expect him to be so fierce. Dozens of lives were gone in just a few breaths. Moreover, no one would have found out if the corpses were destroyed. Xiaohua. After a while, Guosufei said, You're not injured, right? Hehe. Zhang Xiaohua saw her mother's nervousness and walked forward with a smile. How is that possible? Mother, I didn't lose a single hair. Then, she looked at the house that was burned by smoke and smiled bitterly. However, cleaning up the house today will cause me to lose a hair. Buffed. Guosufei laughed and said, With your big brother and Xiaohua, you don't have to do it. Zhang Byron had already woken up and was playing with Little Black and Little Yellow. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua, he seemed to be familiar with her and reached out to Zhang Xiaohua for a hug. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and hugged Zhang Xiaohua in her arms. The 2 little things also climbed onto Zhang Xiaohua's shoulders. Zhang Xiaohua asked about what happened last night. She pondered for a moment and said, Big brother, you think of a way to explain to the villagers of the Guozhuang house. Today, clean up the house a little. I'll be back soon. Where are you going? Guosufei asked nervously. It's okay, mother. Since the bandits of Shizue Mountain know about the Guozhuang house, maybe they will come again in the future. I'll send them away now. But Shizue Mountain is very far away. Guosufei was reluctant to let her son take the risk and said anxiously, It'll be soon, mother. You can cook. I'll be back at noon. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and handed Byron to Lu Qian. Then, he took out several jade talismans and placed them around the Zhang family's courtyard. Then, he took out several more jade talismans and handed them to Zhang Xiaolong, saying, If bandits come again, you only need to crush these jade talismans. They won't be able to enter the courtyard, and I'll know. Okay. After seeing the power of Zhang Xiaohua's jade talismans, Zhang Xiaolong was very confident and said, Are there any more that can set fire? Give me a few. Hehe, there are a lot. Here they are. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and handed all the fire talismans in the purse to Zhang Xiaolong. Hey, is this a jade ingot or a jade piece? It looks like a small golden ingot. It looks better than a golden ingot. Lu Qian asked curiously. Hehe, it's the same. It's the same. Zhang Xiaohua admired her sister-in-law's beauty. At the same time, she wiped the sweat on her head. When Zhang Xiaolong took the fire talismans, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to think of something. She stretched out her hand and asked for a few more. She said, Father, Mother, you can cook first. I'll be back soon. Oh, okay. Xiaohua, be careful. Zhang Kai knew that if Shizue Mountain was not eliminated, he would not be able to live in peace. He did not stop her. The 2 little things were taken down from Zhang Xiaohua's shoulders. She secretly said in her heart, Is father good to you? Little Black nodded, but Little Yellow ignored him. Zhang Xiaohua said in her heart, Is mother good to you? This time it was Little Black's turn to nod. Well, since you know that I'm good to you, then if I have a problem, will you help me? The 2 little things nodded. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Zhang Kai and Guosufei. She said in her heart, This is my father and mother. If they have a problem, I will help. But now I have to go out. You stay here and help them. Listen to them. Do you understand? How to help? It seemed to be Little Yellow asking. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said in her heart, Use your claws to scratch them. Just drive away the people they don't like. Zhang Bairan curiously looked at Zhang Xiaohua and the two little things. When Zhang Xiaohua put the two little things in Zhang Bairan's hands, he withdrew his gaze. Looking at the two little things playing with Zhang Bairan, Zhang Xiaohua nodded slightly. With the two of them at home, Zhang Xiaohua could be a little relieved. Then, Zhang Xiaohua made a gesture to hide her figure. She flew into the air and went straight to Shizue Mountain. In the small courtyard of the Zhang family, everyone looked at the empty space in front of them blankly. Lu Qin said, Xiaohua, is he gone? Let's go. Mother, uncle, is there? Byron smiled and showed a few teeth. He stretched out his hand and pointed at Zhang Xiaohua, who had flown hundreds of feet away. Shizue Mountain used to be very far away from Zhang Xiaohua. It was so far that she had to ride a horse and follow Zhang Xiaohu. At this moment, seeing the same mountain village under her feet, Zhang Xiaohua did not think too much. She just looked gloomy and stared at the many men below. These men were not the same as the ones Zhang Xiaohua saw before. She remembered that there were old, weak, sick, and disabled people. It was not much different from a village. But now, seeing the men training in the square, every one of them was strong and powerful. It immediately attracted Zhang Xiaohua's attention. But when she carefully observed with her spiritual awareness, she saw what was above the gate of the village. She could not help but suck in a breath of cold air, and then her eyes twitched. In front of the gate of the village, there was a row of dozens of wooden shelves. At this time, the shelves were full of corpses wearing various kinds of clothes. The arms of these corpses were tied with ropes, and there was also a rope on the head, hanging on the wooden shelves. Zhang Xiaohua roughly looked. There were hundreds of corpses. Moreover, the clothes were all different. Some were robes, some were short sleeves, and there were also a small number of female corpses. She could not tell their age, but all of them were in tattered clothes. Humph! Zhang Xiaohua snorted coldly. Her figure did not reveal itself, and she floated beside the village. She waited until she had walked through the entire wall of the village and placed the jade talisman at the bottom of the wall. Then, Zhang Xiaohua boldly flew to the back of the stronghold. He had been here before, so he might as well take it that he was familiar with the place. Sure enough, in the gorgeous hall, there were a few people sitting. There was some tea on the table, and several people seemed to be discussing something. Sitting at the head of the table was a man who seemed to be the head of the village. His face was somewhat gloomy, and his small eyes emitted a vicious light. Senior Brother Zhao, Banner Lord Ma sent people to urge us again. I think. Only our Shichui Mountain has not sent the things up. If we can't complete this task in time, you and I will not be able to explain ourselves. Another person who was slightly plump had an amiable face and was full of smiles. When he opened his mouth to speak, the corners of his mouth curled up and he looked exactly like a shopkeeper. That person laughed and said, Junior Brother Qi. Oh no, it should be Master Qi. Don't worry, the Mei family of Nanjiao Town is extremely wealthy. We have already captured Minister Mei's family and brought them to Shichui Mountain. Why would we be afraid of not handing over the money to Bannerlord? I think, as long as this thing is handed over, I'm afraid the commander will personally commend Master Qi. Master Qi did not look happy. He only shook his head and said, although the Mei family of Nanjiao Town has been captured, but they are not as wealthy as the rumors say. How can we explain ourselves? Hee, Master Qi, don't worry. Last night, I interrogated them overnight. After killing a few people of the Mei family, we have a clue about the money. Senior Brother Zhao, please tell me quickly. I'll let Fort Master know that the Mei family's wealth is hidden in one place and not at home. The Mei family doesn't have any male descendants and only has one daughter named Mei Qinglian. Only Minister Mei and Mei Qinglian know where the treasure is hidden. Minister Mei's body is weak and she died on the way to Shichui Mountain. The location of the treasure should be Mei Qinglian's. What about Mei Qinglian? Did you ask her? Master Qi, that Mei Qinglian was not captured. That day, she happened to be visiting a friend and was missed by us. Seeing that Master Qi's expression was not right, Senior Brother Zhao immediately said, however, I have already sent a disciple out and instructed the disciples of the carriage company to not let her escape. That's good. Master Qi's expression eased a little, then he asked, Did that bastard Zhang Yunbo go out again? Where did he go? Master Qi, it's news from the Storm Carriage Company. It seems that there is a big fat sheep in a place called Guozhuang House. Guozhuang House? I've never heard of it. What fat sheep can there be? Desperate patients will turn to any doctor they can find. Master Qi sneered. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua already understood that this was the person he was looking for. Hence, he appeared in the hall. First, he stunned everyone. Then, his figure flashed and pointed at a few people. One by one, he used the bewitching finger to question them. After she finished asking, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes revealed a thoughtful expression. So, this Shichui Mountain is no longer the original grassy Shichui Mountain. It was actually taken over by some banner master and is just a cover. However, this banner master is really hateful. Originally, although Shichui Mountain robbed, they were afraid of the government and did not dare to be too arrogant. They, on the other hand, captured hundreds of people in front of the door, extorted money from them, and then killed them to silence them. And that Storm Carriage Company and Storm Carriage Company also have their informants. No wonder I could get into trouble just by sending a letter. If I did not come back in time, mother, father, big brother, and sister-in-law would have been killed. Please vote monthly, please vote recommendation, please collect, please tip, thank you. -4. Chapter 1068. Zhang Xiaohua could not help but be furious when she thought about how she had almost caused her family to fall into eternal damnation because of her. He just took the small gold nugget given by Nie Qianyu and exchanged it for some scattered silver to pay for the letter. Unexpectedly, he could cause such a disaster. Then, what about the banner master of Shichui Mountain, who originally had some money, who was coveted by this banner master? Wouldn't that be even more pathetic? After that, Zhang Xiaohua asked about the whereabouts of their banner masters. She did not stop. Just like the previous time, she threw everything in the secret room of the mountain stronghold into her belt. Then, she rose into the air and activated the restrictive spell that she had just set up. Not a single bandit in Shichui Mountain could escape. Then, she threw down the jade talismans in her hand. Immediately, a hell of fire in the human world was born. Under Zhang Xiaohua's control, the fire became even more intense and burned everything. The bandits who were initially calm all fled when they saw that things were not going well. The mountain stronghold had long been surrounded by Zhang Xiaohua's restrictive spell. No one could take a step forward. Instantly, the entire mountain stronghold was in a mess. Heart-wrenching screams, regretful cries before death, and pleas for mercy were all transmitted into Zhang Xiaohua's mind in waves. After a few times, Zhang Xiaohua stretched out her hand and wanted to remove the restrictive spell of the mountain stronghold. However, when she saw the hundreds of unarmed and defenseless corpses on the wooden frame in front of the mountain stronghold, Zhang Xiaohua's hand stopped again. Killing people was not the best method. However, if killing people could save more people, so what if she fell into hell after death? Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua understood. She sat cross-legged in the air again. The traces of the heavenly way that had not been activated for a long time in her mind slowly activated. The way of life and death, the hand of karma, both of them influenced each other and moved at the same time. The screams gradually faded away. There seemed to be some Sanskrit chanting and some chanting of sutras. Zhang Xiaohua's figure gradually disappeared, slowly blending into the world. After an unknown period of time, Zhang Xiaohua's figure flashed again. The Zhang Xiaohua who opened her eyes didn't look any different from before, but the starry sky of the heavenly Tao in her body was a little clearer. Her cultivation of the heavenly Tao had improved again. Zhang Xiaohua sighed as she looked at the almost non-existent village that had been reduced to ashes. If I had known this would happen, why did I do it in the first place? But at the same time, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to recall what she had said in her dream. If I had known this would happen, I would have done it in the first place. Cause and effect and cause, how similar they are. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head slightly and put away the jade talismans around the village. She then turned around and flew back to the Guozhuang house. But when she arrived at the Guozhuang house, Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. Although the house in the Zhang family's courtyard had been repaired, the The courtyard was miserable and deserted. Guo Sufei and Zhang Kai were sitting in the courtyard. Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohua were repairing the broken roof of the house. Lu Qian was guarding beside Bai Ren, looking at the door from time to time. Only Bai Ren was holding a small wooden stick, but at this time, she was looking for earthworms. Why is this? Zhang Xiaohua thought and landed. Little uncle? Bai Ren called out very clearly this time and raised his head to look at Zhang Xiaohua. Xiaohua. Zhang Kai and Guo Sufei were startled awake. Zhang Xiaolong and Xiaohua also called out. Of course, when she saw Zhang Xiaohua standing in the courtyard, Guo Sufei couldn't help but wipe her tears. What's wrong? Mother, is the meal not ready yet? Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously. Cook, Zhang Kai scolded. You have been out for a day and a night. Why are you still cooking? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and immediately understood. She had only comprehended the heavenly Tao for a moment, but a day and a night had passed. The immortal Tao, indeed. It was the immortal Tao. Hee, so it's like this. Mother, I suddenly practiced martial arts. I didn't expect it to be so long. I'm fine, you see. Zhang Xiaohua turned left and right, stretched out her arms and said, And good as long as you're fine. Guo Sufei smiled and said, Mother will cook for you. Hee, no need. Mother, I basically don't eat anything now. Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said, By the way, I forgot. I have excellent tea here. Father, Mother, try it. By the way, Mr. Liu, can you come and try it too? Zhang Kai said, My in-law came yesterday and waited for you for a day. He comforted us and said that you must be fine. He should be here soon. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, Mother, I still have to go out for a while. Oh, I promise, I will be back before noon this time. What? You still want to go out? Guo Sufei didn't agree. Mother, although the bandits of Shizue Mountain have been killed by me, but there are still people behind them. If I don't vent this anger, my heart will not be at ease. It will not be good for my future cultivation. Zhang Xiaohua was afraid that her mother wouldn't let her go out, so she simply mentioned cultivation. The bandits of Shizue Mountain? You killed them all? Zhang Kai and Zhang Xiaolong were surprised. And not even chickens and dogs were left alive. Zhang Xiaohua didn't seem to hide it. Isn't it too cruel? Lu Qian couldn't bear it. Zhang Xiaohua told her about the hundreds of corpses in front of the stronghold. Guo Sufei was the first to clap her hands. Good, son. Let's do it. Back then, Mr. Wu from the neighboring village was such a good person, but he was killed by them until his family was ruined. It wouldn't hurt to kill 10,000 of them. Then, I'll go now. Mother, I'll be back in a while. Good. Go quickly and come back quickly. Guo Sufei was unusually straightforward. Okay. Zhang Xiaohua was delighted. He made a hand gesture and flew away. Uncle. Zhang Byron pointed out Zhang Xiaohua's location with great precision again. From the so-called Shizue Mountain stronghold chief, Zhang Xiaohua found out that their bannerlord was in the evil tiger manor between Lu Town and Pingyang City. In fact, if it was in the past, Zhang Xiaohua would have only killed all the bandits in Shizue Mountain to vent her anger. The so-called bannerlord might not have pursued the matter. However, it was different this time. First, Zhang Xiaohu was poisoned by Nun Jingyi, which provoked Zhang Xiaohua to scold Nun Jingyi as an old beggar. Then, her family was harassed by bandits who disguised themselves as Shizue Mountain bandits and almost lost their lives. This made Zhang Xiaohua very angry. Moreover, the stronghold chief mentioned something about Bannerlord and Evil Tiger Manor. It seemed to be related to the manor with a tiger painted on it that Zhang Xiaohua met Little Orange 2 years ago. Wasn't the Bannerlord the one who provoked the bronze-masked old man? If it was the same background, she wanted to see what it was. Ever since this humble Taoist made his debut, this humble Taoist has never suffered such a huge loss. Since you have provoked this humble Taoist, I can only use your blood to make up for it. Zhang Xiaohua thought as he flew. As expected, after flying for a long time, Zhang Xiaohua lowered her body slightly and realized that the surrounding roads were very familiar. Even the small mountain village where she met Yu Dei was still there. Enemies will not meet unless they are enemies. This saying is really true. When he flew close to the evil tiger manor, In his divine sense, an old man wearing a bronze mask seemed to be talking to a green-clothed man outside the western wall of the evil tiger manor. After that, the green-clothed man cupped his hands, looked left and right, and leaped into the air. Using his movement technique, he directly passed through the forest and flew in the opposite direction of Zhang Xiaohua. The face of this man in green. I seem to have seen him somewhere before. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and thought to herself. However, although she could see him with her divine sense, she was still a distance away from the evil tiger manor. When she reached the evil tiger manor, the man in green clothes had already gone far away. The old man with the bronze mask had also returned to the hall that Zhang Xiaohua had come to before. Revisiting an old place, definitely revisiting an old place. However, this time, Zhang Xiaohua easily arrived outside the hall. She stood quietly and looked at the old man with interest. Although the old man's face couldn't be seen clearly, he stood up from time to time and looked around. She knew that this person's mood was very uneasy. It was as if he could feel that someone was watching him. However, the old man walked to Zhang Xiaohua's side and looked carefully. He couldn't find any trace of her. Then, he sat back down and waved his hand and shouted, "Banner leader Ma." A short and fat middle-aged man answered and entered. He said in a low voice, reporting to Commander, "Your subordinate is here. How is the martial arts assembly of the fragrant cult? It's already been half a month. Why hasn't there been any news?" Please wait a moment, Banner leader. The Church of Fragrance is a little far from here. Sending a messenger pigeon is faster than sending an urgent message on horseback. Half a month should be enough. Your subordinate estimates that it should be within the next few days. It's taking you so long to send a message. I don't know what you're all doing. The old man scolded. Also, have you prepared the valuables I asked for? Banner leader Ma said with a crying face, reporting to Commander. Your secondary valuables are really too much. Your subordinate has already prepared them for a long time, but we still can't get them. Now, only Shichui Mountain has yet to be delivered, but Shichui Mountain is under the cover of mountain bandits. There are only a few small mountain villages around them. According to Master Bai, we've already done our best and forced a lot of local tyrants to their deaths, but it's still not enough. Banner leader Ma, I'm not an unreasonable person. Last time, when Deputy Commander suddenly went missing at your evil tiger manor and was suspected to have been killed, I didn't pursue the matter. Also, I listened to you and didn't do anything to those people who messed up my plans. Many thanks for your understanding, Commander. Your subordinate is indeed responsible for what happened to Deputy Commander, but it was definitely done by a lot of government officials. Commander is as wise as the sea and knows that you still need this evil tiger manor, which is why you didn't do anything. It has nothing to do with me. I know. That's your good intentions. However, we are indeed in urgent need of money and supplies this time. If you can complete this task, I'll definitely promote you to Deputy Commander. Banner leader Ma smiled bitterly, but still bowed and said, Your subordinate will go and urge them to send Shichui Mountain's valuables over first. No need. An unfamiliar voice rang out from outside the hall. I've already destroyed Shichui Mountain. Their valuables are all with me. The bronze-masked old man and banner leader Ma were shocked. They looked up and saw a tall and thin young man slowly walking in with his hands behind his back. Please vote monthly, please vote recommendation, please bookmark, please tip, thank you. -4. Chapter 1069. You. Who are you? Banner Master Ma was shocked. He pulled out his sword and berated. Me? You don't need to know my name. You only need to know that I'm here to take your lives. Zhang Xiaohua sneered. This Xiaoxia is able to easily enter my hall. His martial arts must be very high. Did you hear what I said just now? The bronze-masked commander said with a smile. Yes. Zhang Xiaohua didn't hide anything. I was wondering why I was so distracted. I felt like someone was spying on me, but I couldn't find who it was. Xiaoxia's lightness kung fu is top-notch in Jianghu. The commander still had a smile on his face. He didn't care. Ha. Zhang Xiaohua also laughed. She took out Zhu Ming from her bosom and said, Didn't I already say it? I'm here to take your lives. Could it be that old man's ears aren't working well? Strange, I have no enmity with you. Why are you shouting kill as soon as you come? She couldn't see the old man's expression under the bronze mask. She only saw the old man take 2 steps back and put his hand on his waist. Noisy. Didn't I say that I came from Shichui Mountain? Zhang Xiaohua sneered and stabbed with her sword. When Banner Master Ma saw this, he couldn't help but sneer. Zhang Xiaohua's body was full of openings. He could easily break this sword move. Banner Master Ma's right hand trembled. He didn't forget to wave his sword as he faced the enemy. Then, his sword flicked against Zhang Xiaohua's small sword. It seemed that Zhang Xiaohua's sword move was sloppy and ordinary. She was able to flick Zhu Ming to the side with one strike. The bronze-masked old man saw this from behind Banner Master Ma. He was a bit puzzled, but he was also relieved. He put his hand down from his waist. Immediately after, Banner Leader Ma took a step forward and swung his sword downwards, stabbing towards Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder. At this moment, Chasing Dream, who had landed beside Banner Leader Ma, suddenly stopped falling and suddenly rose up. Like a venomous snake that had been awakened, it spat out its tongue and flew towards the bronze-masked old man. The old man was shocked. Zhu Ming was already in front of him. He raised his left hand to grab Zhu Ming, but just as he thought that he had already grabbed hold of Zhu Ming, his vision blurred. Zhu Ming split into 2, dodging his left hand, and was already incomparably fast. The command master nearly cried out. His feet exerted force, and his body rapidly retreated. At the same time, his right hand reached out. However, just as his right hand blocked in front of him, before he could make another move, the 2 sword lights separated again and transformed into 4 sword lights. In the blink of an eye, the bronze-masked command master's chest was pierced with 4 tiny holes. Just as the command master cried out in shock, Banner Leader Ma was also alarmed. The sword in his hand didn't stop and was already nearing Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder. He tilted his head slightly, wanting to see what the command master was shocked about. At the same time, Zhang Xiaohua's body moved and disappeared from under his sword. Immediately after, she appeared in front of the command master and stretched out her hand to stop the bleeding around the command master's wound. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua appear in front of the command master, it was Banner Leader Ma's turn to be shocked this time. He naturally turned his head back to see if there was anyone in front of his sword. Yes, he was sure that the place his sword was pointing at was empty. However, at the same time, he felt a chill at his throat. A sword light flashed past the corner of his eyes. Hearing Banner Leader Ma's corpse fall to the ground with a plop, Zhang Xiaohua didn't turn her head back. She hurriedly stretched out her finger again and used the bewitching finger to ask about the command master. So it's called the Azure Flame Token. No wonder you call yourself the command master. This Azure Flame Token is actually a secret organization of the Righteous Alliance. The deputy command master I killed last time was the 8th deputy chief of the Righteous Alliance, Nan Yuntian? It seems. I remember now. He was the master of Qiu Shidao whom Qin Shirue killed. This person was the 7th deputy chief of the Righteous Alliance, Jiang Yin. Righteous Alliance, although I wanted to go against you, I didn't have the chance. I didn't expect that 2 years ago, I had already killed a deputy chief of your Righteous Alliance. Zhang Xiaohua sneered and thought to herself, moreover, that sinister array was also set up for the Righteous Alliance's Zhang San. Zhang San, I heard that you are a martial artist. Why did you use this sinister array? The Evil Tiger Gang was originally a small gang, but later on, they were controlled by Wan Jianfeng. After Wan Jianfeng was destroyed by the Righteous Alliance, they returned to the Righteous Alliance. The Righteous Alliance saw that this place was secretive and placed the Azure Flame Token here to do some things that the Righteous Alliance couldn't do. Righteous Alliance are Righteous Alliance. You do one thing in the open and another in the dark. What qualifications do you have to be called the Righteous Alliance? This Azure Flame Token, AI, no matter if it is a hero of the pugilistic world or a commoner, as long as they are unfavorable to the Righteous Alliance, they will all be killed. As long as they do some shady things, everyone under this token has the blood of innocent commoners on their hands. By the time Jiang Yin finished speaking, Zhang Xiaohua's face was already covered with frost. What he hated the most was the strong bullying the weak in the pugilistic world. They used their martial arts to enslave the commoners and built their benefits on the lives of commoners. If it was a vendetta in the pugilistic world, he might not care. But this azure flame token. After Jiang Yin breathed his last, Zhang Xiaohua showed no mercy. She concealed herself and killed all the people of the evil tiger clan. Then she entered the underground hall. At this time, there was a huge amount of gold, silver, and jewels placed in the hall. Presumably, they were all for the righteous alliance. Zhang Xiaohua did not stand on ceremony and took them all. She filled her purse and belt to the brim. There was no more space. After setting the evil tiger manor on fire, Zhang Xiaohua made a hand seal and flew up into the air. Just as she was about to fly back to the Guozhuang house, she suddenly thought. According to Jiang Yin, the azure flame token received the order from the ethereal mountain villa. At this time, the ethereal mountain villa is under the control of the 6th alliance leader called Ban Fugui. This order was passed down by him. Moreover, the righteous alliance still has 4 consecrators guarding the ethereal mountain villa. Since they are to be killed, the people who gave the order must also be killed. If it wasn't for them, would the Shichui mountain villa have harmed the innocent? If I only kill the people who acted and ignore the people who gave the order, wouldn't I be a person who started off strong but ended weak? Hee, I don't know if second brother and the others have arrived. It's a good opportunity to lend him a hand. Zhang Xiaohua changed her direction and headed towards Pingyang City. In less than 4 hours, the ethereal mountain villa had already appeared in her divine sense. At this time, the ethereal mountain villa was already filled with killing shouts and sabers flashing and swords flashing. Sweat, Zhang Xiaohua was greatly embarrassed. Previously, when she met Zhang Xiaohu, she still said that she would help him. It seemed that the trip back home had wasted a lot of time. If not for the news that the Azure Flame token was a subordinate of the Righteous Alliance from the evil Tiger clan, wouldn't she have already returned to the Guozhuang house? Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua had given Zhang Xiaohu a jade talisman, and it was very easy to find the location of Zhang Xiaohu, Chang'e, and Chen Chun. The 3 of them were at a corner of the ethereal mountain villa and were protected by the disciples of the Misty School. Although the disciples of the Righteous Alliance were ferocious, their lives were not in danger. After taking a closer look, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but frown. The disciples of the Misty School were clearly divided into 2 groups. One group was led by Zhang Xiaohu and had just attacked the foot of the ethereal mountain. They were entangled with some disciples of the Righteous Alliance. These disciples of the Misty School were also what Zhang Xiaohua had seen at Shixin Peak. The other group was the disciples of the Fragrance Cult. At this time, they were also wearing the Misty School's uniform and were led by Ming Qing. Their martial arts were obviously better than the disciples of the Misty School, and they had already attacked halfway up the ethereal mountain. In the square of the ethereal mountain villa, Aunt Qin was still leading some female disciples of the Mingtsue Hall to clean up the remaining disciples of the Righteous Alliance near the meeting hall. At the top of the ethereal mountain villa, there were still countless disciples of the Righteous Alliance waiting in formation. Looking at the short and fat old man at the top of the mountain and the 4 weirdly dressed old men beside him, Zhang Xiaohua frowned slightly. He didn't quite understand what Nanjingyi meant. Based on what Nanjingyi knew, she shouldn't know the strength of Li Jian and the others and only treated them as useless people. Then, with Ming Qing and Gao Kunheng, the 2 inner disciples, they could each deal with one, but there were still 3 consecrators. Even if Aunt Qin dealt with one more, Ding Chao, Du Feng, and the others dealt with one more, Zhang Xiaohu and Chang'e wouldn't be able to deal with the remaining consecrator. Moreover, the blue flame token was not too far away from the Taowu mountain villa. If Ban Fugui, who was guarding the ethereal mountain villa, saw that the situation wasn't good, he only needed to send people to the evil tiger villa to find people. The disciples of the Misty School would not be able to resist. Could it be that Nanjingyi wants to see the final trump card of the Misty School? Or is she going to weaken the strength of the Misty School even more, so that she can control them in the future? Zhang Xiaohua thought to himself, but if second brother and the others were to die here, wouldn't there be no one left in the Misty School in the future? Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand. Actually, Zhang Xiaohua didn't really understand. Nanjingyi wasn't a celestial being, and also didn't have the ability to predict the future. Moreover, she could only send disciples like Ming-Qing and Gao Kunheng to the Misty School. As for the other inner disciples and the consecrators of the incense cult, she couldn't send any of them. After all, she kept saying that the disciples of the Misty School had re-entered the pugilistic world. If there were famous experts from the incense cult, how could they still be called disciples of the Misty School? They could just be called disciples of the incense cult. Moreover, if the disciples she sent were too powerful, Zhang Xiaohu and the others might not be willing. Of course, more importantly, Nun Jingyi thought that if she held a martial arts convention, Zhang San of the Righteous Alliance would bring some of the Vice Alliance masters to participate. If there were people left to guard the Righteous Peak, the Misty Peak would naturally be weak. If she sent the disciples of the Misty School to suddenly attack, it would definitely be effective. Unfortunately, man proposes, God disposes. When the Righteous Alliance raised money and sent 4 old consecrators to the Misty Peak, it just so happened that the disciples of the Misty School were attacking the peak. Therefore, although the disciples of the Misty School were aggressive and had the help of the incense cult's Wuming Hall disciples and were stronger than the disciples of the Righteous Alliance, Ban Fuguei had 4 consecrators by his side. He didn't panic at all and only calmly commanded his disciples to form a defensive line to block the attacks of the disciples of the Misty School. -4. Chapter 1070. By the time Zhang Xiaohua flew to Ethereal Peak, the situation was already very unfavorable for the Righteous Alliance. The area below Ethereal Peak was already occupied by the Misty School. Numerous female disciples of Mingtsue Hall were treating the injured Misty School disciples one by one, whereas Ming-Qing, Gao Kunheng, Zhang Xiaohu, Du Feng, and Ding Chao led their respective Misty School disciples to attack more than half of Ethereal Peak. However, at this time on Ethereal Peak, the remaining members of the Righteous Alliance were all elites. Fighting with their backs to the wall and staking everything on one throw, it ignited the fighting spirit of the Righteous Alliance disciples. In a moment, the two factions stuck together again. Seeing that the time was right, Ban Fuguei looked at the 4 old consecrators and exchanged glances. The 5 of them drew their long swords. Ban Fuguei shouted, "I was wondering who it was. So it's the remaining members of the Misty School. Where is Hu Yuni? I'll have a real fight with him." No one answered. Zhang Xiaohu asked in a clear voice, "Who are you?" "Grandmaster Hu isn't here." Hu Yuni isn't here? Ban Fuguei was stunned and laughed. "Since Hu Yuni isn't here, who are you? Why do you call yourself a disciple of the Misty School? How dare you ask for the name of the Righteous Alliance?" "I'm the leader of the Misty School, Zhang Xiaohu. My master is Wan Hai, a disciple of the leader of the Misty School." "Zhang Xiaohu? Wan Hai?" Ban Fuguei was stunned and asked curiously, "Wasn't Wan Hai captured by the fragrant cult? You aren't with Hu Yuni. Where did you come from?" "Ha ha ha," Zhang Xiaohu laughed. "We came from the fragrant cult and are preparing to rebuild the Misty School." "Ah? How did you escape?" Ban Fuguei was stunned. He had always thought that these people were the disciples of the Misty School led by Hu Yuni. Moreover, because of a certain plan of the Righteous Alliance, he was still astonished. When he heard this, he couldn't help but be dumbstruck. However, Ban Fuguei was the Righteous Alliance's deputy alliance leader after all. He immediately calmed down and came to a realization. He laughed heartily and said, "So that's how it is. Nun Jingyi has a good idea. She actually wants to meddle with the Misty School. You're just a 3rd-generation student of the Misty School. How can you be in charge of the Misty School? Come. I am the Righteous Alliance's Class Fuguei, the 6th Vice Alliance leader. Let me teach you how to use the sword." As he spoke, Ban Fuguei displayed his qing gong and swept past many disciples who were fighting, heading straight for Zhang Xiaohu. How could Ming Qing let him get close? With a wave of his sword, he killed the Righteous Alliance's disciple in front of him. He stood up and shouted, "You're just the Vice Alliance leader of the Righteous Alliance. What right do you have to challenge my Misty School's gang leader? I am Ming Qing, the deputy leader of the Misty School. I am here to challenge you." "Ming Qing?" Ban Fuguei was stunned. "I've never heard of the Misty School having a disciple named Ming Qing. Who are you under in the Misty School?" Ming Qing didn't hide it and smiled. I admire gang leader O's bravery. I only recently joined the Misty School and received the heavy responsibility of gang leader Zhang. I dare not slack off. Ha ha ha. Ban Fugue laughed. How could he not know? He waved his sword and said, I'd like to see the martial arts of the incense cult. Ming Qing didn't reply, and the two of them started fighting. Then, just as Zhang Xiaohua thought, one of the old masters was caught by Gao Kunheng, another by Ding Chao and Du Feng, another by Ant Qin, and the last by the Misty School. There was no one else left in the Misty School. Only Zhang Xiaohu, Chang'e, and Chen Shun could catch the last old master together. Seeing the leaders of the two factions exchange blows, the other disciples also knew that they had merely become foils. If their own faction's leader was victorious, they only needed to charge forward and kill the remaining disciples. If their faction's leader was defeated, they could either surrender or stubbornly resist until the end. However, these two possibilities could only be discussed after the outcome of this crucial battle had been decided. Thus, they gradually opened up a gap and slowly moved to the side with their weapons in hand. While they were on guard, they also focused their attention on the battle between the leaders of the two factions. After the time it took to eat a meal, the gap between them gradually became apparent. Ming Qing was a more outstanding disciple in the Ruijin Palace, but compared to Ban Fugue, he was still inferior. It was the same for Gao Kunheng. His swordsmanship was slightly better than the old master's, but his internal strength was much worse. He had already fallen into a disadvantageous position. Of course, Ming Qing and Gao Kunheng originally planned to join forces to deal with the deputy chief of the Righteous Alliance. This was just an accident. Since Ming Qing and Gao Kunheng were like this, Ant Qin was certainly not much better. She helped Yang Ruping take care of the affairs of the Misty Hall on the Shirxin Peak and spent less time practicing martial arts than in the Misty Peak. Her martial arts did not improve but regressed. At this time, she was not much better than a few years ago. In the other two factions, Du Feng and Ding Chao had the help of Zhang Xiaohua's soothing pulse pill. The internal strength in their meridians had increased by several years out of thin air. However, because the time was still short, they could not completely refine the efficacy of the soothing pulse pill. They also could not use it well. In addition, their swordsmanship was not very exquisite. Therefore, at this time, they could only barely not fall into a disadvantageous position. Looking at Zhang Xiaohu, Chang'e, and Chen Shun, they were even worse than Du Feng and Ding Chao. Although Chang'e and Chen Shun had the same opportunities as Du Feng and Ding Chao, they were women after all and were congenitally deficient. Although they had Zhang Xiaohu's help, they had already fallen into a disadvantageous position. As for Zhang Xiaohu, his martial arts should be the weakest among these people. The internal strength obtained from the soothing pulse pill had been destroyed and was slowly recovering. The yin-yang energy mass in his meridians was also gradually increasing. Although he had endless potential, he was only at the beginning. In the fight with this old consecrator, he did not use much strength and all the killing moves were blocked by Chang'e and Chen Chen. If this situation continued to develop, there were no accidents. These people would be killed by the Righteous Alliance. The Misty School's operation to take back the Misty Peak could only end in failure. Seeing Zhang Xiaohu retreat slightly and reach out to take something out of his chest, Zhang Xiaohua knew that it was time for her to make a move. Ding! In the air above the Misty Peak, a voice like spring thunder sounded. Who are you? Is there anyone called Ban Fugue? Everyone was shocked and looked up. Just above their heads, they saw a young man dressed in a simple robe and not very tall standing with his hands behind his back. The people fighting in the field saw clearly, and all of them took a few steps back to distance themselves from their opponents. Their eyes flashed with envy. Only Ban Fugue did not know whether it was good or bad. He hesitated and did not know whether to answer. Before Ban Fugue hesitated, Ming Qing immediately bowed and said, "Master, I'm..." Then, he looked at Zhang Xiaohu and hesitated for a moment before saying, "I'm a disciple of the Misty School. I'm here to help rebuild the Misty School under the orders of the Misty School's leader, Nanjing Yi. Please, Master, give me a name." Misty School? Misty School? Zhang Xiaohua, who was disguised as Panin, frowned and said, "You don't need to know who I am. I'm only looking for Ban Fugue from the Alliance of Righteous Sects. Whether it's the Misty School, or the Alliance of Righteous Sects, I don't care at all. Zhang Xiaohu looked from the side and held Zhang Xiaohua's communication jade talisman in his hand. He secretly wondered if he should crush it. After hearing Zhang Xiaohua's words and seeing the look in Ming Qing's eyes, Ban Fugue knew that he had no choice but to stand up. Hence, he took a step forward and bowed. I'm Ban Fugue. May I know why Master Immortal is looking for me? Zhang Xiaohua stood in the air and looked at Ban Fugue coldly. Her look made Ban Fugue's hair stand on end. Ban Fugue, I want to ask you, is the Azure Flame token yours? Azure Flame token? Ban Fugue was stunned. He knew that this was bad. However, he could only brace himself and say, the Azure Flame token is my Alliance of Righteous Sects subordinate. Indeed, it's under my command. Haha, that's good. I have always been reasonable. Your Azure Flame token offended I, and has already been destroyed by I. You, hand over your life too. As Zhang Xiaohua finished speaking, a sword light flashed in front of them and went straight for Ban Fugue's throat. When Ban Fugue heard this, he panicked. He sincerely wanted to explain, but the sword light was as fast as lightning. How could he have time to explain? He raised the sword in his hand and also stabbed at Zhu Ming. It had to be said that the martial arts of the Alliance of Righteous Sects Vice Alliance leaders were indeed impressive. This sword blocked Zhu Ming's path, and the tip of the sword went straight for Zhu Ming. Unfortunately, just as Ban Fugue's sword was about to stab Zhu Ming split into two and dodged the sword. Ban Fugue was shocked, but he was not nervous. He held his sword horizontally and wanted to block it. However, at this moment, Ban Fugue suddenly thought of the 8 sword lights that killed people in front of Rejuvenation Valley. He felt that something was wrong. He jumped up and used his Qinggong to dodge. At the same time, his left hand reached into his chest and wanted to take out a dagger. However, just as he jumped up, the 2 sword lights immediately turned into 4. Before Ban Fugue could take out the dagger, one of the sword lights pierced his throat and disappeared in a flash. Immediately, Ban Fugue fell to the ground dead. Everyone was shocked. Zhang Xiaohua's flying sword flew out. Everyone only saw the sword light flash, and it pierced in front of Ban Fugue. Ban Fugue's several sword moves were in vain. It seemed that he could not block the attack of the flying sword. Then, Ban Fugue fell to the ground and the sword light disappeared. The whole process took only a few breaths. The Alliance of Righteous Sects' famous 6th Vice Alliance leader was buried under the flying sword of the immortal Tao. It was simply too easy. Everyone was shocked, and each had different reactions. The 4 consecrators of the Alliance of Righteous Sects did not dare to ask. They looked at each other and immediately got up and scattered. They used their Qinggong to escape, only to hear a voice in the air. Are you all also from the Alliance of Righteous Sects? Since the Azure Flame token is a subordinate of the Alliance of Righteous Sects, you all don't need to leave. While speaking, 4 sword lights flashed and each chased after one. Those 4 old consecrators had long lost their courage. They only raised their swords to block slightly and were stabbed to death by Zhu Ming. When Zhang Xiaohu and the rest saw this, they were already happy. They all bowed and wanted to thank her. Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand. I am just looking for the Azure Flame token. It has nothing to do with you all. I just happened to come at the right time. No need to thank me, no need to thank me. Then she flicked her sleeves and flew into the distance. Not long after, she disappeared. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's departing figure, not only did Zhang Xiaohu ponder, even Changgu and Chen Chun seemed to have some understanding. But, thinking of that person's face and height were completely different from Zhang Xiaohua's, they were puzzled and could not be sure. All right. The heavens bless my Misty School. Vice Leader Ming, Vice Leader Feng, lead the disciples forward. If the Alliance of Righteous Sects disciples surrender, we can spare their lives. If they don't surrender, kill without mercy. Zhang Xiaohu ordered with a cold face. -4. Chapter 1071. Zhang Xiaohu's voice was very light, and his tone was cold. However, he emphasized the words, Deputy Faction Leader Ming. He must have been very dissatisfied with Ming Qing's actions and words. Ming Qing was slightly stunned. He turned to look at Gao Cunheng and saw the mocking expression in his eyes. He snorted coldly and nodded. Yes, I will obey faction leader Zhang's orders. Although he said that, there was no respect on his face. Gao Cunheng despised him in his heart, but he still replied, yes, faction leader. I will follow deputy faction leader Ming's orders. After that, he looked at Ming Qing and nodded slightly. Ming Qing waved his hand and said, all disciples, listen to my orders. The young disciples of the Misty School were also mixed in with the disciples of the Fragrance Cult. When they saw this scene, they felt ashamed and slowly looked at the ground. Zhang Xiaohu's eyes narrowed. He raised his hand and said loudly, Misty School disciples, listen to my orders. Charge. After that, he held his sword and stepped over Ban Fugue's corpse. He rushed toward the Righteous Alliance disciples who were still afraid. Changge, Chun Shun, Du Feng, and Ding Chao did not hesitate. They all waved their swords and followed. Charge. Ming Qing did not dare to be a hindrance. He waved his hand and the disciples of the Fragrance Cult also moved forward, on the side. Aunt Qin saw this and could only sigh. She knew that the Misty School was on the right track. Zhang Xiaohu still had a long way to go before he could break free from the puppet situation. Therefore, she led a few disciples of the Mingcue Hall and charged in. The deputy faction leader of the Righteous Alliance's Fugue class had been killed. The 4 consecrators had also been stabbed to death. The disciples were like a group of dragons without a leader. They had fallen into the trap of Nanjing Yi at Lingxiang Peak. With the current strength of the Misty School, they would definitely be able to control them. As for the Righteous Alliance disciples, there was no need to say anything. They had already made up their minds when Zhang Xiaohua showed up. Now that they saw the Misty School disciples charging at them, they only put up a slight resistance before giving up and surrendering. They had taken down Ethereal Mountain Villa, and Misty School had obtained a temporary victory, but there were many things that needed to be done in Misty School. There were a lot of complicated matters, and they had to set up defenses to welcome the attack of the Righteous Alliance. All of these things required the attention of Zhang Xiaohu, the great sect master who did not have much experience in the world of martial artists or in managing a sect. Zhang Xiaohua had made his move and killed the leader of the Righteous Alliance in one stroke like a thunderbolt. He was in a great mood. He concealed himself and flew straight towards the Guozhuang house. When he was halfway there, suddenly, in front of him, an extremely bright and strong light flashed and disappeared. Then, a strong wave suddenly appeared, as if the world was shaking. It spread in all directions. The invisible, violent, and almost unparalleled impact sent Zhang Xiaohua's body flying high into the sky. It was just like the perilous waves that Zhang Xiaohua had encountered in the sea many years ago. He could not keep his balance. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. He had already released his divine sense. He only felt that the qi of heaven and earth was like a huge wave crashing onto his body. He could barely breathe through his mouth and nose. His body was thrown high into the air and then fell straight down. Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to be negligent. He formed a seal with his hands, wanting to stabilize his body. But with a thought, his body immediately floated up. It was as if he had just started practicing the Imperial Wind technique. He could not control his own movements at all. Why is this? Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. But when he had just stabilized his body, the huge qi of heaven and earth had already dissipated. Only the qi of heaven and earth in his divine sense proved that Zhang Xiaohua had encountered a moment ago. When he flew up again, Zhang Xiaohua's body could move as he wished. There was no longer a situation where he could not control his body like before. Could it be because of the rich qi of heaven and earth? Zhang Xiaohua thought and said angrily, if it was because of the impact of the qi of heaven and earth, it should be the same as before. I can't control my body. It should be a feeling of powerlessness. It should be the same as when I encountered in the sea. It should not be the kind of control that makes me float far away just by forming a seal. I kind of understand. Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He threw out the dragon binding bracelet and formed a seal to activate the fire dragon. Indeed, just as Zhang Xiaohua had predicted, the fire dragon was slightly bigger than before. I see. It is indeed like what venerable fire dragon said. The chi of heaven and earth is the foundation of the celestial Tao. Any spells are built on the usage of the chi of heaven and earth. If the chi of heaven and earth is abundant, all spells will be extremely powerful. If the chi of heaven and earth is scarce, all spells will be inferior. Celestial Tao, this is the destruction of the celestial Tao. If the celestial Tao were to flourish my current powers, what would they be like? Would I be flying much faster than now? Oh yes, what happened just now? Zhang Xiaohua thought. He extended his body and flew towards the place where the light flashed. The strong flash of light and the explosion of the chi of heaven and earth happened in an instant. Furthermore, it was far away. Zhang Xiaohua only knew the general direction, but not the exact location. Hence, after flying for a while, he had already passed Lu Town and arrived at a place with beautiful scenery. However, he did not discover anything. It should be here. Based on my senses. Zhang Xiaohua really didn't have much confidence in his senses. He was only relying on his divine sense now. Otherwise, he would get lost while flying. Zhang Xiaohua scanned the forest with his divine sense, but didn't find anything out of the ordinary. He looked around and flew for a while, but still couldn't find anything worth paying attention to. Feeling somewhat disheartened, he was about to turn back. There's someone here? In his senses, a man dressed in martial arts clothes and carrying a wooden bucket suddenly appeared on a rugged mountain path. Maybe he's fetching water. Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head and turned back to the Guozhuang house. The forest was quite big. It was impossible for no one to be here. Zhang Xiaohua had seen more than 10 woodcutters and hunters. There was a spring about 10 feet away from the man. Wouldn't it be normal for him to fetch water? However, after flying for a while, Zhang Xiaohua felt that something was amiss. This man's appearance was too sudden. It was as though he had appeared out of thin air. He had not even seen him with his divine perception before he appeared on the mountain path. Furthermore, this man was clearly dressed in martial arts attire. He did not have any weapons in his hands. He was even holding a wooden bucket. This made Zhang Xiaohua feel that something was amiss. No, I have to go and take a look. If there's something abnormal, it must be a demon. Zhang Xiaohua turned around and searched again. TSK. He was dumbfounded. The man was gone, and there were more than one mountain spring. There were also many mountain paths. Zhang Xiaohua did not use his divine perception to mark the area, so how could he find the man? Needless to say, there must be something fishy going on here. Seeing that the man had suddenly disappeared, and there was no trace of him in a radius of a few miles, Zhang Xiaohua was certain. However, he used his senses to scan the surroundings again. It was the same as before. So, he had no choice but to leave a trace of his senses and turn back. Zhang Xiaohua flew very fast. In less than 10 minutes, his senses had already reached the Guozhuang house. Everything in the Guozhuang house was normal. Zhang Byron was outside the courtyard. He was walking unsteadily and scratching Little Black and Little Yellow who were surrounding him. Zhang Byron seemed to sense Zhang Xiaohua's senses and looked up. However, Zhang Xiaohua was still very far away. How could he see them? Little Black and Little Yellow were even more excited. They broke free from Zhang Byron and wanted to fly to Zhang Xiaohua. Gosh, Zhang Xiaohua had already noticed that there were several Guozhuang house children around Zhang Byron. They were looking at Zhang Byron enviously. If the two little things flew out now, they would be seen through. However, he did not know how to command the two little things. He could only shout in his heart, "Good Little Black, good Little Yellow, don't fly. Don't come. When Mom goes back, I'll give you good food." Strangely enough, as soon as the two little things escaped from Zhang Byron's little hands, they immediately stopped. They raised their heads and shook their heads in a very strange manner. Then, they lowered their heads again, as if nothing had happened. What good children! Zhang Xiaohua sighed in his heart. The two little things seemed to have heard him. They somersaulted in the air and were very excited. Ha! Zhang Xiaohua was also very happy. It seemed that these two little things were really his children. Oh right, my two little ones. Zhang Xiaohua pretended to be a strict father and mother in the air. Be an ordinary animal in front and behind. Don't fly around. You can only fly when you're with Dad. Mom, do you understand? Gosh, how could little black and little yellow know what in front and behind meant? They even heard the word fly from Zhang Bairan. Moreover, how would they know how to walk ordinary animals? Zhang Xiaohua was really not a good father and mother. Haha, Zhang Xiaohua laughed. Suddenly, he was stunned. What do you think? Because Zhang Xiaohua was flying in front of Mount Wuzhua. Mount Wuzhua was quite a distance from the Guozhuang house. Zhang Xiaohua had only heard about it since he was young. He had never been here with the adults, so he did not have a direct impression of it. However, at this time, the mountain that pierced straight into the sky like 5 fingers was like a shocking finger that tore open Zhang Xiaohua's memory. This seems a little familiar. Zhang Xiaohua descended. He pinched his chin and looked carefully. He was sure that he had never been here before. He remembered that when he was young, he wanted to play here with his elder brother. His elder brother thought that he was a hindrance and shook him once. It made him cry at home. His grandmother comforted him for a long time before he forgot about it. Where have I seen this before? Zhang Xiaohua rolled his eyes. Then, he remembered something. He quickly reached into his money bag and took out the sheepskin scroll that Yin had entrusted to him for safekeeping. He flipped through the picture on it. That sheepskin scroll was one of the 4 scrolls. Weren't the 2 half-life-like fingers on it similar to Mount Wuzhua? This is the place where the Misty School found the treasure? Zhang Xiaohua's face lit up. He put away the sheepskin scroll and landed. His divine sense was like a waterfall as he carefully inspected the entire Mount Wuzhua. Please vote for me. Please add me. Please tip me. Thank you. -4. Chapter 1072. On 5 Claw Peak, the forest was lush, the grass was luxuriant, and there were all kinds of strange rocks. The scenery was beautiful. Not long after, there were a few groups of young men and women laughing and playing. Everyone's eyebrows were filled with love, and it seemed like they had made an appointment to talk about love on the mountain. There were also a few woodcutters, walking along the mountain path with firewood on their backs. Birds chirped in the empty mountains, and streams gurgled. It was a marvelous sight. Strange, everything looks normal. Where is the treasure map? Zhang Xiaohua stopped in midair and concealed herself. She released her divine sense and looked around. Although she admired the beautiful scenery, she had no idea where to find it. After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua took out the sheepskin scroll from the Misty School again. The sheepskin scroll from the Misty School should be made of 4 pieces. The piece on the upper right corner had half of 5 Claw Peak's middle finger, ring finger, and pinky finger drawn on it. Looking at this sheepskin scroll, Zhang Xiaohua recalled the sheepskin scroll he saw before. That should be the upper left corner of the entire sheepskin scroll, with 5 Claw Peak's thumb, index finger, and half of his middle finger drawn on it. This sheepskin scroll must be pointing to 5 Claw Peak, but with just these 2 sheepskin scrolls, she could not tell where the treasure map was pointing to. Looks like I have to find the fragrant cult and Among the 4 sects that destroyed the ethereal sect, there was no need to talk about the aroma cult. There was definitely a sheepskin scroll. That so-called Xian Rongang was able to find a monk from Dalan Temple to help them. Did that mean that the Xian Rongang was a subordinate of Dalan Temple? Then the sheepskin scroll I saw before should be in the hands of the Dalan Temple. If I had known before, I would have just taken that sheepskin scroll. Why worry about it here? The last sheepskin scroll must be in the hands of the Alliance of Righteous Sects. The Alliance of Righteous Sects? They actually dared to attack the Guozhuang house, and even kept such a shady organization like the Green Flame Token. They are a disgrace to the name Alliance of Righteous Sects. Looks like if there is a chance, I have to go to the Alliance of Righteous Sects and take that sheepskin scroll and let them cry. Zhang Xiaohua made up his mind. Just as he was about to put away the sheepskin scroll, his eyes inadvertently caught sight of a small arc at the bottom of the sheepskin scroll where the ring finger corresponded to. This is... Zhang Xiaohua hesitated and looked at it carefully several times. Then he released his divine sense and saw that in the middle of 5 Claw Mountain, there were several forests, which corresponded to the position of the arc on the parchment. Could it, the arc mark of the treasure map of the treasure map? Most of the other markings are on the other sheepskin scroll, and this sheepskin scroll only has a small part of it. Zhang Xiaohua pinched her chin and thought for a moment. She flew to the top of the ring finger mountain. It was no different from what she saw with her divine sense previously. There was no fluctuation of vitality here, nor were there any rare herbs. There were only a few clumps of wild jujube trees, standing tall under the sun and the mountain breeze. Wild jujube forest? Zhang Xiaohua looked at the plain and ordinary wild jujube forest and almost laughed bitterly. Her family was poor when she was young. Her two elder brothers would look for food in the surrounding mountains and forests when they had nothing to do. The wild jujube was a specialty of Lu Town. Well, it could not be said to be a specialty. It was common in all the forests around Pingyang City. When she was young, Zhang Xiaohua followed Zhang Xiaohu and Zhang Xiaolong around. She had eaten many of these sweet and sour jujubes before. Even her teeth had been affected by the sourness of these wild jujubes. Is the treasure in this wild jujube forest? Zhang Xiaohua released his divine sense. The whole wild jujube forest was like what he saw with his eyes. It was no different from the wild jujube forest in his memory when he was young. The only difference was that there were more rotting leaves and wild jujubes in 2s and 3s in the forest. This is strange. I don't see anything different. Should I go in and take a look? Zhang Xiaohua was a little hesitant. After all, what she saw with her divine sense was no different from what she saw with her naked eyes. Moreover, she had been away from the Guozhuang house for a long time. Last time, she had made her mother worried. This time, it was better to go back in time. Zhang Xiaohua finished thinking and was about to turn around. Suddenly, a chill came from the bottom of his heart and spread throughout his body. Shivering, Zhang Xiaohua shuddered and all the hair on his body stood on end. He finally thought of something. It was the same feeling Zhang Xiaohua had when he passed through the forest at the entrance of the Yulong Grand Canyon. The whole wild jujube forest was dead silent. No matter if it was a normal mountain forest, whether it was wild jujube forest or wild forest, as long as there were trees, there would definitely be birds. And when there were birds, there would definitely be birds chirping. The forest at the entrance of the Yulong Grand Canyon was a formation, but there were no birds chirping. Could it be that this wild jujube forest was also a formation? However, the forest at the entrance of the Yulong Grand Canyon was usually covered by fog. Only when the forest was in the Yulong Grand Canyon would the fog dissipate. Thus, people could tell at a glance that this was a formation. Unfortunately, Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense was suppressed by the formation of the Yulong Grand Canyon. He couldn't go very far and didn't know the situation of the entire mountain forest. He also didn't know if the situation in this wild jujube forest was similar to the formation in the forest. However, one thing was certain, this wild jujube forest was definitely not ordinary. Perhaps it was the location of the hidden treasure on the sheepskin scroll. Since he knew that it was a formation, Zhang Xiaohua certainly didn't dare to be careless. Suppressing the shock in his heart, he flew to the front of the wild jujube forest. With his hands behind his back, he carefully sized up the forest. This wild jujube forest was about 3 mu in size. Inside, there were sparse wild jujube trees. The wild jujubes on the trees were also sparse. Similarly, there were some ripe jujubes on the ground. The mountain wind blew. At the top of the wild jujube trees, the small branches swayed with the wind. Occasionally, a few small wild jujubes fell to the ground. Except for the lack of sound and the absence of birds on the trees, everything was exactly the same as an ordinary wild jujube forest. After looking for a long time, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't see what kind of formation this was. Naturally, he couldn't talk about breaking the formation. Frowning and hesitating for a moment, Zhang Xiaohua walked towards the wild jujube forest. When he reached the edge of the wild jujube tree, he stopped. What he saw with the naked eye was the same as what he saw with his divine sense. The space between the 2 wild jujube trees was enough for a carriage to pass through. To enter or not to enter? Zhang Xiaohua's heart was beating like a drum. Perhaps I should try first? Zhang Xiaohua was a little too confident in his own character. However, when he took a step into the wild jujube forest, a sense of vigilance rose from the bottom of his heart. This feeling was the result of his understanding of the way of karma. It made him tremble and shocked. It was as if there was an unparalleled aura in front of him that made him feel an unprecedented sense of danger. At the moment when the sense of vigilance appeared, Zhang Xiaohua felt a huge suction force coming from the mysterious wild jujube forest in front of him. The suction force wasn't his feet, nor was it his body. It was the divine sense he sent out. Strangely, at the same time when the suction force appeared, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes suddenly blurred. A huge and magnificent palace appeared in front of Zhang Xiaohua's eyes. However, at this moment, how could Zhang Xiaohua dare to hesitate? As soon as the sense of vigilance appeared, he immediately made a hand seal and flew away. As Zhang Xiaohua's figure flew away, the suction force of the wild jujube forest also changed. Like the mouth of a giant beast, it sucked Zhang Xiaohua's body. Zhang Xiaohua's body just flew away and stopped in midair. His foot was still within the range of the wild jujube forest. Go! Zhang Xiaohua's face changed greatly. Without thinking, his other hand seal changed again. It was the wood escape technique that Zhang Xiaohua had learned from between the clouds and the water. A green light flashed. Zhang Xiaohua's figure didn't escape, but the light on his foot flickered, and he immediately escaped the range of the wild jujube forest. Immediately, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to stay. He made a hand seal and flew away immediately. Until he flew to the vicinity of Luzhan, he didn't dare to look back. Sweat. What kind of strange place is this? Zhang Xiaohua wiped the sweat on his forehead and scolded in his heart, I have always been a good person. Why did I die here today? Stoneman Peak and Five Claw Peak are not far from Luzhan. Why did I never? At this point, Zhang Xiaohua was suddenly stunned. His mind lit up and some of the doubts in his heart were immediately cleared. Isn't that so? Misty Sect had obtained this sheepskin scroll 5 years ago. Furthermore, they had obtained the treasure from the location of the Five Claw Mountains' hidden treasure. Following that, Misty Sect had met with a calamity. Calculating the time, wasn't that the time when Hero 1, Heroine Shui, and Hero Lu and the others appeared around Lu Town? Maybe Hero 1, Heroine Shui, and Hero Lu went to the wild jujube forest of the Five Claw Peak. Cause and effect. Cause and effect. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but sigh. She understood and closed her eyes to comprehend. If Wen Wenhai and Xueqing didn't come to Luzhan, how could they save Zhang Xiaohua's family? If they didn't see the martial arts of the 2 Misty School disciples, how could Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu have the idea of practicing martial arts? If they didn't have this idea, how could they walk out of the Guozhuang house and go to Pingyang City? If they didn't go to Pingyang City, how could Zhang Xiaohu enter the Misty School? How could Zhang Xiaohua learn the worry-free mental cultivation technique? Without these 2 possibilities, how could so many things happen in the future? How could Zhang Xiaohu regain control of the Misty School and Zhang Xiaohua save the entire Misty School? If it weren't for Lu Yueming, Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaolong would have died in the hands of the 3 wolves of Xichui Mountain. Lu Qian would have become the wife of the mountain bandits, and Zhang Bairan wouldn't have been able to be born in glory. However, if it weren't for Wen Wenhai, Xueqing, and Lu Yueming's trip to the Five Claw Peak, perhaps, the Misty School wouldn't have been targeted by the Righteous Alliance and wouldn't have been destroyed by the Fragrance Cult, the Dalan Temple, and the Righteous Alliance. Cause and effect. One cause and one effect. This cause and effect were intertwined and intertwined. When would such a karmic retribution come to an end? Boom. Zhang Xiaohua's mind roared and the way of karma suddenly moved. Under the starry sky of Zhang Xiaohua's heavenly Tao, 5 huge fingers continuously formed hand seals. It seemed to be demonstrating the essence of the way of karma and also seemed to be demonstrating the way of karma's dharma. Please vote monthly, recommend, bookmark, and tip. Thank you. -4. Chapter 1073. An endless torrent came from afar and hit Zhang Xiaohua, but it did not cause any ripples. It ignored Zhang Xiaohua's existence and quietly passed through her. Then, it flowed into the distance, which was also very far away. She could not see the end of it. Zhang Xiaohua stood in the middle of the torrent in a daze, looking at the boundless and endless torrent. He was very surprised at where he was. But then he saw with his naked eye that every tiny droplet of water in the torrent was a lifelike face. These faces were doing something, and these ordinary things would stop abruptly after a certain point. Then, they would start again, and it would continue endlessly. When Zhang Xiaohua carefully looked at some of the water droplets that passed through her body and thought for a long time, she suddenly realized that these connected water droplets were the cause and effect of some things. One after another, one after another, and one after another, they formed such a vast torrent. She did not know how many things and how much cause and effect there were. As she was thinking, she suddenly saw a familiar face in one of the water droplets. Was it not Ming? But that water droplet was very far away, and she could only see Ming's face. The others could not see it clearly. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and wanted to move, but she wanted to, but she did not have the strength. Her whole body did not have any strength. Seeing that Ming's face was far away, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but feel anxious. With a thought, her whole body turned into a big hand, and the 5 fingers moved. It was a very mysterious spell. The spell pointed at the water droplet where Ming was. In an instant, the water droplet solidified and stopped. But this solidification only lasted for a moment. Because this water droplet solidified, the other water droplets that it was connected to also solidified. Even the torrent around the water droplet showed signs of solidifying. But this solidification was so small in the vast torrent. In just an instant, it was washed away by the torrent behind, and no trace of it could be seen. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua's body that had turned into a hand could not support it. A sense of fatigue that she had never felt before arose spontaneously. She fainted for a while, and when she woke up again, she was in the air beside Lu Zhan, exactly where he had closed his eyes to comprehend. "Io, this is bad." Zhang Xiaohua barely managed to stabilize his body and descended from the air. He used his hand to support his aching head, and his heart was filled with regret. This enlightenment was indeed valuable, but he had already told his mother and father that he would be back in a moment. However, he did not know how long it had taken him to comprehend this. He thought that Guozhuang's mother must be worried again. Now that Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense was exhausted, and the vital energy in her meridians was also exhausted, she could not use the flying technique or the imperial wind technique. She could barely use the ethereal steps. How could she return to the Guozhuang house quickly? However, this was also good. Zhang Xiaohua was always in the clouds before, and it was not convenient for her to show up in front of the people in the Guozhuang house. Now, after Zhang Xiaohua took out some silver to buy an inferior horse, she had a legitimate reason to return to the Guozhuang house. In the river of karma, what Zhang Xiaohua saw was very strange. It had exceeded Zhang Xiaohua's cultivation and knowledge. Even in the small water droplet, Meng, perhaps it was not the woman in Meng Chao's dream, but the moment she appeared, Zhang Xiaohua was confused. Even though her face was very similar, but she should be Meng Chao's mother, the woman Aya whom he had never met before. The road from Lu Town to the Guozhuang house, Zhang Xiaohua had felt that it was very long. It was long enough for her to walk for a lifetime. But now, before she could understand what she had comprehended and the little things about the Lady Aya, the familiar Guozhuang house was in front of her. At the entrance of the village, Zhang Byron was playing with Little Black and Little Yellow. These 2 little things might have known that Zhang Xiaohua was coming, and were unusually excited. Perhaps they had been instructed by Zhang Xiaohua to restrain themselves. Only when Zhang Xiaohua appeared at the side of the road, did they want to escape from Zhang Byron's hands and fly to Zhang Xiaohua's side. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua jumped in fright and hurriedly warned in his heart not to move. Sure enough, the 2 little things did not understand the word fly, but they knew not to move, so they obediently stayed by Zhang Byron's side. At this moment, Ji Xiaohua happened to come looking for Zhang Xiaohua. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua slowly walking by the side of the road, she was extremely happy. Reaching out, she hugged Zhang Byron and quickly ran in front of Zhang Xiaohua's horse. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's pale face, Xiaohua was stunned. Turning her head to look at the children at the entrance of the Guozhuang house, she whispered, "Young master, are you injured?" Zhang Xiaohua looked at the child who had the same name as her and smiled. "Didn't mother say it? Don't call me young master, you never change." Ji Xiaohua blushed and shook her head. It's still easier to call me young master. I don't want to change. Is young master's injury serious? Where am I injured? I'm just unbearably tired. Zhang Xiaohua waved his hand and jumped down from the inferior horse. Xiaohua hurriedly reached out a hand, wanting to support him. That's not necessary. Do I still need you to support me? Zhang Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said casually, Of course, in Soning Town, this is how we take care of the young masters of large families. Xiaohua said in a deadpan manner, Forget it, forget it. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't out-talk Ji Xiaohua. Waving his hand, she said, My family isn't a large family, you don't need to. Thinking of this, she asked again, Oh right, Ji Xiaohua. How many days have I left home? How many days? Xiaohua stared blankly and scratched her head, saying, Young master, what do you mean? Didn't you just leave this morning? This morning? Zhang Xiaohua also stared blankly. He originally thought that he had comprehended in Shizue Mountain for a few days, but he didn't realize it. Today's comprehension had already seen some torrent, so it should have taken 10 days or half a month. Who knew? It was only a moment. Yes, it was early in the morning. Young master came back and immediately left, saying that he had to deal with the others and would be back in a while. But it was almost dark, and you didn't come back, so old madam was worried and kept looking up at the sky when she had nothing to do. Speaking of this, Xiaohua looked up and said enviously, But I didn't expect young master to come back on a horse. Zhang Xiaohua's heart moved, and he said with a smile, Ji Xiaohua, if I teach you this flying method, do you think your mother will be happy in the underworld? Xiaohua stared blankly, and her face immediately showed a pleasantly surprised expression. She carefully put Zhang Byron on the ground, turned over and kowtowed, crying, Young master, no. Master, are you going to accept me as your disciple? Mother, she will definitely like it. Speaking of Xiaohua's mother, Zhang Xiaohua also sighed. In order to repay Zhang Xiaohua's kindness, she dragged her sick body and traveled thousands of miles to report. Even if she died in a foreign land, she didn't tell anyone about her selfishness. She only told Ji Xiaohua in private that if she couldn't return the favor, how could she cultivate in peace? Zhang Xiaohua stretched out his hand to help Ji Xiaohua up. Zhang Byron, who was beside him, opened his big black eyes. He thought that Ji Xiaohua was playing a trick, so he also wanted to kneel down. He muttered, Master, Master. However, Byron was still young, and his hands and feet weren't nimble. He fell to the ground in an instant. Before he could call out Master, he started to cry. Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to reach out and carry Zhang Byron, coaxing, Byron, my good boy, don't cry. The other hand pulled Xiaohua, saying, Get up, Ji Xiaohua. If I open a sect, you will be my disciple. If I don't open a sect, I can also teach you martial arts. Master, a master for a day is a father for life. Master, if you teach me martial arts, then I will be master. I won't call you young master anymore. I will call you master. Xiaohua said respectfully. Zhang Xiaohua held Zhang Byron in her arms. Looking at Ji Xiaohua's serious expression, she nodded slightly and said with a smile, Since that's the case, I will recognize you as my disciple. Ji Xiaohua was overjoyed. She turned around and wanted to bow again. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes were sharp and her hands were quick. She stopped her and said, Don't kowtow. I know what you are thinking. Yes, master. Ji Xiaohua shouted happily. She turned around and led the inferior horse behind Zhang Xiaohua, saying with a smile, Master's horse can be compared to Huan Huan. Huan Huan? Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She smiled and said, Your Huan Huan is very good. It's just that she hasn't come back with me now. She is a spiritual beast. How can this inferior horse compare to her? Spiritual beast? What is that? Xiaohua was stunned. You will know in the future. Zhang Xiaohua did not know how to explain. At this time, Zhang Byron had stopped crying. He called out for master and struggled to get off the ground. Little Black and Little Yellow were obediently perched on Zhang Xiaohua's shoulders. They were very obedient. Zhang Byron got off the ground and called out for master. He ran towards the Guozhuang house. Zhang Xiaohua watched with a smile and quickly followed behind. Xiaohua was leading the horse behind her. Before Zhang Xiaohua entered the village, a villager walked out. He was surprised to see Zhang Xiaohua and asked him about the past few years, but Zhang Xiaohua did not say much. He only said that he was poor outside and had no choice but to return to Gua village. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's horse, the villager understood and told Zhang Xiaohua about the Zhang family's courtyard being robbed by bandits. In the end, he did not forget to say, "Fortunately, your Zhang family is blessed with good fortune. When the bandits saw that you did not have any gold or silver, they let you go. No lives were lost, only a few houses were burned down. But the chief's family, the gold and silver were gone, and a few lives were lost. Sigh, Argua village. How poor are we? How did we attract bandits? This clan leader, TSK, he is also unlucky. Tell me, where did he get all the money from? Isn't it all the hard work of our villagers? I still don't know." Seeing that this villager, whose surname was not Gua, seemed to have endless bitterness, how could Zhang Xiaohua be willing to listen? She only said a few perfunctory words and then left for home. Thinking back, when Zhang Xiaohua returned home and showed off her martial arts skills, it could be said that she returned home in glory. She was admired by many people and could be called a capable person of the Guozhuang house. Now that she was a little down and injured, it attracted the attention of many people. The villagers she met would say a few words of concern and secretly sigh at the changes in the world. Therefore, when Zhang Xiaohua reached the door and saw her mother coming out to welcome her, the sky was already dark. -4. Chapter 1074. Zhang Kai and Guo Sufei, as well as Zhang Xiaolong and his wife, came out of the door to welcome them. Earlier, Guo Sufei had heard from the neighbor's children that her youngest son, whom she had not seen for many years, had returned. Guo Sufei did not pay much attention to it because Zhang Xiaohua had returned home a long time ago. It was just that no one knew that he had come and gone. However, when she heard that Zhang Xiaohua's face was pale and that he seemed to be injured, Guo Sufei could not sit still. When she saw that Zhang Xiaohua was really sick, her heart ached. Although she saw Zhang Byron calling out "Master, Master," and running past her, she only patted his head. However, her eyes were fixed on Zhang Xiaohua's face, and her footsteps were somewhat hurried. Seeing that her mother was worried and her father was blaming her, Zhang Xiaohua stepped forward and bowed. "Greetings, mother. Greetings, father." She then winked and bowed to Zhang Xiaolong and Lu Qian. "Greetings, elder brother, elder sister-in-law." Zhang Xiaolong and Lu Qian were stunned for a moment, but they immediately understood. They were surprised and said, "Xiaohua, why did you suddenly come back?" However, Guo Sufei did not care. She grabbed Zhang Xiaohua's hand and said anxiously, "My son, where are you injured?" "Didn't I say?" Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly said, "Mother, I'm fine. Really, I'm just tired. I ran around for a few days and wanted to come back quickly. You?" Guo Sufei glared at him. She looked at the villagers next to her and could not bear to pinch her hand. She only said, "It's good that you're back. Mother would rather you come back a few days later than see you like this." Zhang Xiaohua's heart warmed. She nodded and said, "I've made Mother worry. I'm really tired. I'll be fine tomorrow after resting for a night." "Well, since Xiaohua said so, it should be fine. Let's go home first. The child came back from afar, so it's better for her to rest." Zhang Kai continued. Then, he turned to the villagers and said, "Everyone, when Xiaohua is well rested, I will bring her to visit all of you in a few days. Don't mention it, don't mention it. We're all from the same village. There's no need to be so polite." Everyone chuckled when they heard that. They waved their hands and busied themselves with their own matters. Only a few naughty children stared enviously at Little Black and Little Martin on Zhang Xiaohua's shoulders. They were obviously wondering why the puppy was so smart to be able to stand on Zhang Xiaohua's shoulders. They might even have to train their own dogs at night. When Zhang Xiaohua followed her mother and the others into the house, Mr. Lu, who had received the news, also rushed over. Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to neglect and quickly went forward to greet him. Who knew that Mr. Lu did not dare to accept the greeting and also respectfully returned the greeting, making Zhang Xiaohua a little embarrassed. Lu Qian saw it from the side and pursed her lips into a smile. Father knows that you can fly. When you are an immortal, he doesn't dare. Qianer, Mr. Lu chided. Xiaohua is different from us now. You can't. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly bowed again and said respectfully, although I have some remarkable powers, an elder is still an elder. Mr. Lu is my elder. I dare not neglect you. This time, Mr. Lu could not move. He could only allow Zhang Xiaohua to bow. However, his eyes were filled with gratification. When Zhang Xiaohua stood still, Mr. Lu could move his hands and feet. He did not fuss about it anymore. He used his hand to stroke his beard and said, when drinking water, one can think of the source. When one is rich, one does not go back to one's roots. This is a great virtue. Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head and invited Mr. Lu to take a seat. When Mr. Lu sat down, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said to Zhang Kaiying with Sufei, Father, Mother, don't worry. Second brother has already reached Pingyang City. I reckon he will be back in a few days' time. Is that so? Guosufei was surprised and asked in return. Of course. The boy saw it with his own eyes. Don't worry. Zhang Xiaohua made a solemn vow and said, if second brother is busy and can't come back, let's go to Pingyang City to visit him. He is now the sect leader of a famous sect. He is very prestigious. Mr. Lu was surprised. Pingyang City was so far away. Zhang Xiaohua left early in the morning and came back at night. If she did not fly, how else could she go? Lu Qian was smart. She brewed the Yunwu tea that Zhang Xiaohua brought back with mountain spring water and served it. Before the teacup was placed on the table, a refreshing tea fragrance filled the entire central room. This tea fragrance was intoxicating. However, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but frown when she smelled it. The Yunwu tea itself contained the energy of heaven and earth. The mountain spring water of the Zhang family was even more abundant. If they only drank the mountain spring water, it was already extremely fragrant. If they drank the Yunwu tea, it would be hard not to attract attention. Looking at her mother, father and Mr. Lu enjoying the tea, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Father, our mountain spring water. Has anyone been thinking about it? Yes? Why not? Zhang Kai drank the tea and put down the teacup. He smiled and said, after all, our crops are different from other families. Your mother and I, and Mr. Lu, are getting younger and younger. Many people have come to ask about it. Cough, cough. Because of this, I have even discussed with your brother. We still use the river water when we plant crops. We will only use the mountain spring water for our own consumption. No one has discovered anything. However, Mr. Lu shook his head. That might not be the case. When we were drinking tea, we were also seen by people a few times. They all wanted to ask where we bought the tea leaves from. We all said that it was sent by Xiao Hu. This Yunwu tea is even more fragrant. It is not something that ordinary people can drink. In the future, people might see through us. Isn't it just drinking tea? Is it that serious? Guosufei was a little doubtful. In-law, don't be careless. If the Zhang family did not show some signs in the past few years, how could we have provoked the mountain bandits a few days ago? Mr. Lu explained. After all, Mr. Lu had seen the Zhang family in the past few years with his own eyes. If they did not have some external wealth, they would not be so prosperous. How could they not attract the envy of others? Hearing Mr. Lu's words, Guosufei was a little sad. She said, if Mr. Lu says so, then my Zhang family is very rich? Haha, in-law, wealth has its own reasons. With wealth, there must be a way to guarantee wealth. Otherwise, you can only be like the clan leader of the Guozhuang house. Then, he looked at Zhang Xiaohua and said, isn't there still Xiaohua here? If it was not for her a few days ago, you all would have been in trouble. Of course, now that Xiaohua is back, how much wealth do you all want? Isn't it just a matter of words? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Mr. Lu's words are very reasonable. Then, she told them what had happened in the past few days. When they heard that Zhang Xiaohua had killed many people in the past few days, everyone could not help but tremble in fear. Guosufei also frowned, as if she wanted to blame him. Mr. Lu saw this and sighed in his heart. He even explained, in-law, don't blame Xiaohua for this matter. It is necessary to eradicate evil. If he shows mercy, he may be harmed instead. And didn't you hear? These people's hands are all covered in blood. Xiaohua is also enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. What he did was very right. But Guosufei's brows were still knitted. She said worriedly, but Xiaohua has done so. He has killed many people himself. In the future, won't he go to hell? I'd rather go to hell myself than let my child go there. These words expressed the feelings of a loving mother. The hall was silent. Lu Qian looked at Byron, who was mumbling something in her arms. She also had the same thoughts. She only wanted to bear all the sins for Byron and let all the pain of Byron be on her. She could not bear to let him have the slightest bit of grievance. Mother, Zhang Xiaohua stood up and walked to his mother's side. He squatted down like a child in the past and smiled. Mother, don't worry. Your son is now an immortal. A place like hell will not take me in. Guosufei knew that he was comforting her. She smiled and rubbed her son's head. She said, Xiaohua, you are all grown up. Mother, can't care so much. But when you are outside, Mother is always worried. Afraid of this, afraid of that. Even when you come back, Mother doesn't dare to ask you about Xiaohu personally. Boy is unfilial. I've made Mother worry. Zhang Xiaohua said guiltily. Xiaohua, don't worry. Although your mother misses you, she always praises you in front of me. She said that in the entire Guozhuang house, only her 3 sons are capable and no one can compare to them. Zhang Kai comforted at the side. That is. Guosufei glared at Zhang Kai and said, Look at Baldigwa's family at the entrance of the village. One of his children works at the counter in Lu Town and only earns 1 cent of silver a month. Another child was found to be playing with fake wood ears and was locked in the prison in Pingyang City. Then look, Zhang Xiaohua was listening with a happy face. However, the more he listened, the stranger his expression became. In the end, he almost laughed bitterly. His mother had mentioned all the good-for-nothings in the Guozhuang house. How could he compare with them? Mr. Lu also laughed as he listened. Lu Qian also pursed her lips and laughed. Zhang Byron was tired of staying in his mother's arms. He walked in front of Zhang Xiaohua and opened his 2 small arms, asking for a hug. However, he kept calling out, Master, Master, eh? Mr. Lu heard and asked curiously, Xiaohua, what did Byron call you? It doesn't seem to be little uncle, right? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and told him about what happened at the entrance of the village. He said, I thought that if I could teach Ji Xiaohua some martial arts, I would be able to establish myself. It would be worthy of this fate. Xiaohua, this little brat. He doesn't want to be a good younger brother, but insists on being a disciple. Guosufei said angrily, this time, he should call me Master's grandmother. Zhang Xiaohua was sweating profusely. He waved his hand and said, Mother, please this? Xiaohua, can I take on a surname in the future? I thought you were talking about me. Mr. Lu rolled his eyes and said with a smile, Then, if Xiaohua establishes a sect, wouldn't Ji Xiaohua be the first disciple? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and nodded naturally. Perhaps. Mr. Lu shook his head with a smile and said, No, Xiaohua. The first one to kowtow was Xiaohua, but the first one you helped up was not him. Then, who else? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. However, she immediately thought of Zhang Byron, who raised his hand and said, Mr. Lu, are you talking about Byron? But Byron is my nephew. If I have the ability, I will definitely teach him. As for apprenticeship, there is no need. Mr. Lu shook his head. No. Not only Zhang Xiaohua, even Zhang Xiaolong and Lu Qian, who had been silent all this time, were also puzzled. Please vote monthly. Please vote recommendation. Please collect. Please tip. Thank you. Com to vote recommendation and monthly. -4. Chapter 1075. Mr. Lu took a sip of tea and placed the teacup on the table. He stroked his beard and smiled. Xiaohua, if you were to establish a sect, what would it be called? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, I'm slow-witted. I casually mentioned the name Beidou School and used it in the pugilistic world. I don't have any other ideas for now. Yes, the Big Dipper stars in the middle of the night. Once the Big Dipper appears, it will reign supreme. Mr. Lu nodded when he heard this. He said a lot of unfathomable things like Chu Zhigao's mother on Dragon Mountain. Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head and didn't know how to interrupt. After Mr. Lu finished talking about the benefits of Beidou School, he asked Zhang Xiaohua, Xiaohua, you think that Byron is your nephew and is related to you by blood. You have the obligation to teach him and pass on the teachings of Beidou School to him. But you have to know that Byron is only your nephew, not your son. He should belong to Xiaolong and Lu Qian, not you, Zhang Xiaohua, and not the Beidou School. Therefore, from this point of view, you did not teach the Big Dipper sect's orthodoxy to him properly. Moreover, this is also very unfair to Xiaohua. Maybe Ji Xiaohua doesn't care, maybe Byron doesn't care, maybe your disciples don't care when you're alive, but when you're gone, when your disciples are gone, what about their descendants? Will they not care about Byron? Also, what about after Byron? Will he take in disciples? What about his disciples? Will he also start another sect? Or in your Beidou School? As Mr. Lu asked one question after another, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but scratch his head again and again. He had never thought so much, but Mr. Lu's words did sound reasonable. Moreover, since you want to start a sect, of course, rules are the most important. With rules, your sect can follow rules and operate normally. So, the first thing you have to do is not play favoritism and treat your blood relatives as your orthodoxy. You can't teach your martial arts to your nephew without the sect's name. Master, master. Zhang Byron, who was next to him, muttered, not knowing if he understood. But Zhang Xiaohua was at a loss for words. He thought of the strange situation when Zhang Byron was born. This little thing's future achievements would be incomparable to his. How could he be his master? No buts. Mr. Lu waved his hand and said, since you helped Byron up first, then if you want to take in disciples, then Byron should be your first disciple, which is the first disciple of the sect, and not Xiaohua Ji. Xiaohua, do you think what I said is reasonable? Mr. Lu raised his head and said to Xiaohua Ji, Mr. Lu's words are very reasonable. Master did help Byron up first. Byron is still young, but at that time, he was still calling Master. Xiaohua Ji said honestly, I don't dare to fight for the title of first disciple with little young Master. Lu Qian didn't know why her father said so much to Zhang Xiaohua, but she couldn't say anything. She could only whisper, Xiaohua, my father's words, if it's inconvenient, don't listen. Your sect is more important. Maybe you don't need to care. Everyone here is related to you, so they won't leak it. Zhang Xiaohua had already made up her mind. She laughed and said, Mr. Lu's words are very reasonable. Although Byron's apprenticeship was a little coincidental, just a little boy playing around, but what is fate? This is fate. If I were to set up a sect, this Beidou School's first disciple would undoubtedly be Byron. Hee, since I can be Zhang Byron's uncle, why can't I be his master? Byron also giggled. He put his little hand on Zhang Xiaohua's face and scratched again and again. Well, after scratching for a while, he was tired and fell asleep in Zhang Xiaohua's arms. Lu Qian took over Zhang Byron. Zhang Xiaolong couldn't help but ask, I heard that all sects have a mountain gate. For example, the Misty School is in Pingyang City's Misty Peak. What about your Beidou School? Where is it? Don't tell me it's in the Guozhuang house. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Big brother, of course it won't be in the Guozhuang house. I already know it in my heart. Let's wait a little longer. After all, I'm still young and my cultivation hasn't reached the peak. I'm afraid I'll delay others. Then, he looked at Xiaohua Ji and said, Of course, even if I don't set up a sect, this martial art will still be taught to Ji Xiaohua. Why don't we set it up in Xichui Mountain? I heard that the mountain there is very high. It's easy to defend and hard to attack. Zhang Xiaohua sweated profusely. Big brother, Xichui Mountain's reputation is ruined. How would I dare to go there? I already know it in my heart. Let's wait a few years. If the opportunity doesn't appear, I'll find a better place. Oh right, big brother, let me ask you. In the west of Lu Town, about 100 miles away, is there a mountain range called the Mountain Range? 100 miles? Zhang Xiaolong shook his head. I haven't been that far. Mr. Lu said, that place seems to be called Yao Mountain. I went there when I was young. Why? Do you want to set up your sect there? Zhang Xiaohua shook her head. No, I just feel that there's something strange there. Just now when I passed by there. Just now? Everyone was surprised. That's 100 miles, not 10 miles. Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head and said, I'm just guessing. I don't know the exact distance. Maybe 200 miles? Yes, the exact distance should be 120 miles. Mr. Liu smiled and nodded. Everyone felt dizzy again. After a long while, Guosufei probed, Xiaohua, you? Mother has something she doesn't understand. Mother, please speak. Zhang Xiaohua quickly said. Well, Mother thinks, isn't your second brother the head of some misty school? Why don't you join the misty school? You two brothers can support each other if you're together. Isn't that better? Zhang Xiaohua understood her mother's meaning. She waved her hand and said, I naturally understand Mother's words. If the misty school needs anything, or if second brother wants me to do something for the misty school, of course I won't refuse. But second brother got the inheritance of the misty school. Naturally, he has to work for the misty school. But I didn't get the inheritance of the misty school. So, people who walk different paths cannot make plans together. Even if I can't start my own sect, I'm afraid I can't leave this legacy to the misty school. People who walk different paths cannot make plans together. Mr. Liu clapped his hands and praised. These words are wonderful. Then he turned to Guosufei and said, In-law, congratulations on giving birth to 2 dragons and phoenixes. Xiaohua and Xiaohu should be outstanding. If they were both in the misty school, one of them would have to settle down. Although it can't be said that a mountain can't accommodate 2 tigers, the principle is the same. I'm afraid that in the future, the 2 brothers will have something to do with each other. Why don't we do as Xiaohua said? Each of them can support each other in their future. It's the best of both worlds. Zhang Kai and Guosufei nodded as if they were enlightened. But when Zhang Xiaolong heard his father-in-law praise his 2 brothers, he felt proud but also a little sad. He faintly felt that he was much worse than his brothers. Lu Qian was extremely sensitive. She hugged Byron with one hand and secretly held her husband's hand with the other. Her eyes were full of tenderness. How sensitive were Zhang Xiaohua's senses now? She also felt that something was wrong. Looking at her brother and sister-in-law's love, she couldn't help but think of a dream. If husband and wife had such a mutual understanding, why would they care about helping each other in difficult times? Immediately, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Mr. Liu praising me and my second brother is really a little too much. Maybe it's really like what Mr. Liu said. Us 2 brothers have some achievements, but these may not be the credit of the 2 of us. For example, my second brother has received the legacy of many seniors in the Misty School. Not to mention the distant ones. The closest ones are sect leader Il, Zhang Chengyue, Hero 1, Heroine Shui, and Hero Liu. Mr. Liu only sees my second brother's achievements. He may not know the contributions of these seniors in the Misty School. Mr. Liu clapped his hands and said, Xiaohua is right. This old man is wrong. Just say whatever you want. Mr. Liu, please listen. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, As for myself, I have received the legacy of a person called Venerable Fiery Dragon. He was a rogue cultivator and didn't belong to any sect. Even if he had a sect, it would have died out long ago. I just took advantage of it and took it as Venerable Fiery Dragon's contribution. Before Venerable Fiery Dragon, I don't know about it and I can't talk about it. Mr. Liu didn't know what Zhang Xiaohua was referring to, but he felt that what she said was very reasonable. He nodded slightly. So, you can't just look at my second brothers and my brother's contributions. You can't look at the contributions of the people behind us. Zhang Xiaohua said and said to Zhang Xiaolong, As for big brother, me? When Zhang Xiaolong heard that it was him, he was stunned. He quickly let go of Lu Qian's hand and asked curiously, That's right, big brother. There's another type of people. They might not be able to succeed from birth, they might not be able to become famous, and they might remain unknown forever, but they exist for the sake of other people's existence. Without them, the people who rely on them will never be able to become famous and succeed. And, as long as these people become famous, then those who are destined to be the helpers of others will also become famous. It's just that their names will always be associated with those famous people. Zhang Xiaohua finally smiled and said, Big brother, you are such a person. Your name will definitely become famous along with Byron. Your name will shake the world. Byron? Zhang Xiaolong was surprised and said, after talking for so long, I thought you were talking about you. When you become the head of Beidou School, when people hear that I am Zhang Xiaohua's brother, they will respect me to death. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, It's Zhang Byron, Zhang Jian. In the future, your name will shake the world because of him. Because you are Zhang Byron's father. Your existence is for the sake of Zhang Byron's rebirth. Maybe. I also exist because of Byron's existence. After listening to Zhang Xiaohua's words, Mr. Liu unconsciously let out a long sigh and said, Xiaohua, what you said is very right. This old man agrees. However, a person is a person after all. Everyone has their own reason for existence. If they live purely for others, it's too dry and boring. No matter if their existence is for themselves or for others, they have to be positive, courageous, and optimistic. Only then will there be true meaning in life. -4. Chapter 1076. How could Zhang Xiaolong not know that his father-in-law was talking about him? He stood up and cupped his hands. Many thanks for father-in-law's guidance. This son-in-law understands. Mr. Liu nodded and said, Since Qian chose you before, I also find you pleasing to the eye. I don't care if you've studied or if you're from a scholarly family. Now, although you're still a farmer and aren't necessarily wealthier than others, as long as you and Qian are happy, why would I care about you? You don't have to feel inferior. What's the point of being a farmer? Mr. Liu's words were very touching. However, when everyone heard, not wealthier than others, their faces revealed a strange expression. This expression was so obvious that it could be seen on Ji Xiaohua's face. Mr. Liu couldn't help but feel strange. He said, Could it be that I'm wrong? Zhang Xiaolong quickly smiled. Father-in-law is right. This son-in-law will be a farmer in the future. Zhang Xiaohua interrupted. Mr. Liu is right. It's just that this kid thinks Big Brother doesn't need to be a farmer in the future. Moreover, this Guozhuang house may not be able to stay for long. Mr. Liu was very surprised and said, Why is that? Everyone was also curious about Zhang Xiaohua's last sentence. Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and a huge chest appeared in the central room, right in front of everyone's eyes. This is... Mr. Liu was extremely shocked. I won't hide it from Mr. Liu. The bandits from Shichui Mountain came last time. It wasn't a groundless accusation. My Zhang family isn't as poor as a church mouse right now. We're not necessarily poorer than others. Then, Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and the lid of the chest opened. Wow! Lu Qian and the others all cried out. Zhang Xiaolong was even more surprised. Xiaohua, this doesn't seem to be our family's chest. Mr. Liu looked at the chest full of jewels and was also dumbfounded. Although he was well-read, he also had talent but had no opportunities. How could he have seen so much wealth? After a long while, he came back to his senses and sighed. After all, I'm just a mortal. Previously, I thought I was noble and virtuous, but now I know that it's because I haven't seen enough money to attract me. Just this chest of gold, silver, and jewelry is enough to tempt me. What about these? Zhang Xiaohua seemed like she would not stop until she said something shocking. With a wave of her hand, 3 similarly huge boxes were lined up in a row, all the way to the door. This, as Zhang Xiaohua opened the box, Mr. Liu's hands trembled. Mr. Liu, do you think my Zhang family is an ordinary village family? With all these, how can our Zhang family still stay in the Guozhuang house? My big brother, can he still be an honest farmer? After a long while, Mr. Liu finally calmed down. He took a deep breath and drank another cup of tea. He shook his head and said, It's easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but it's hard to go from extravagance to frugality. In-law, it's not that this old man wants to criticize you, but this old man really admires you. With such a large amount of wealth, you can still peacefully live the life of a farmer. Even if this old man doesn't know how to live the life of a farmer, I still don't know how to live the life of a farmer. Zhang Kai said with a simple and honest smile. Even if you don't know, with money, there are many things you can do. The details of your life are already different from the villagers of the Guozhuang house. This Guozhuang house can't be lived in anymore. Xiaolong, have you always been dissatisfied with farming? Xiaolong nodded honestly. That's right. I feel that farming is no longer as urgent as it used to be. It doesn't matter whether I farm or not. Then, he looked at Zhang Xiaohua and said, even when the fields were burned a few times ago, I just casually threw out the jade pieces that Xiaohua gave me. I was too lazy to find a fire sickle. Seeing that Xiaolong was somewhat ashamed, Mr. Lu smiled and said, this is human nature. Before, farming was to make a living. If you don't farm, you can't do it. Working hard is also something you should do. Now that your family has a lot of money, who would farm for themselves? Farming is only for leisure activities. Xiaolong, you don't need to blame yourself. Zhang Xiaohua heard and said, actually, when I gave the money to my family, I already thought of this. But, seeing that I have so much wealth and father and brother still have to work hard in the fields, I can't bear it. So, Little Blossom, you're just being filial. You can't blame anyone for that. If you have money and still let father and brother work in the fields, then there is a problem. Mr. Lu smiled and said, but now, you are thinking about where to live and how to live. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes turned and smiled. Not just us, Mr. Lu. Don't you want to go with us? Mr. Lu was stunned and immediately became overjoyed. If you are willing, why wouldn't I be happy? Father, look at what you are saying. If you follow us, we can't be happier. Lu Qian had already integrated into the Zhang family. Naturally, she knew that her parents-in-law were very kind and respected her father. Of course, she would hope that her father would go with the Zhang family. Zhang Kai understood at this time and said, in-law, whether we move or not, you have to be with us. These years, we have tasted tea together. It feels good. If you are not here in the future, I will also feel lonely. Seeing that Guo Sufei also wanted to speak, Mr. Lu didn't argue. He nodded and said, in-law, even if you don't ask me to stay, I will still stay in your Zhang family. Where can I find such delicious tea in this world? Zhang Kai and Guo Sufei were also happy to hear this. Then, they frowned and asked Zhang Xiaohua, Xiaohua, why are we talking about moving again? We have never thought of leaving the Guozhuang house. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Father, Mother. Mr. Lu said it well. Things have changed with the passage of time. Now, second brother is the head of the Misty School. Although I haven't achieved it yet, from second brother's point of view, it is extremely inappropriate for you two to stay in the Guozhuang house. Previously, a thief from Shizue Mountain almost hurt you. If the enemies of the Misty School come to find you in the future, won't it be a headache for second brother? So troublesome. Guo Sufei rubbed her forehead with her fingers and said in distress, if I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have let you go out in the past. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. It seemed that mother was still proud of second brother for becoming the head of the Misty School. Zhang Kai disagreed. If they don't go out, they will still be fighting with the Guozhuang House's old Guozhuang House's land. Zhang Xiaolong also smiled and said, yes, we can't stay in the Guozhuang House, but we can go to Lu Town or Pingyang City. We can go to second brother's Misty School. It is also a good opportunity to practice martial arts. Big brother is right. Maybe second brother has the same idea. Let's wait for him to come back in 2 days. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, I don't know how Xiaohu is now. When will he come back? Guo Sufei muttered. Second brother is busy enjoying being the head of the gang. When he settles the matters of the Misty School, he will definitely come back. Zhang Xiaohua explained for Zhang Xiaohu. At the ethereal heights outside Pingyang City, Zhang Xiaohua imagined that Zhang Xiaohu would be enjoying being the head of the gang. However, he was now a busy mess. During the day, Zhang Xiaohua displayed her invincible prowess by transforming into Pan En and killing the deputy chief of the Righteous Alliance's wealthy class and the 4 consecrators. The remaining members of the Righteous Alliance had lost their will to fight and had surrendered early on. They became the captives of the Misty School and quietly waited for the Misty School to deal with them. The young disciples of the Misty School were all at the ethereal heights dealing with the aftermath. The task of capturing the Righteous Alliance members naturally fell on the shoulders of the disciples of the fragrant cult led by Ming Qing. After the captives' acupoints were sealed and sent to the dungeons and rooms of the ethereal heights to be guarded, Zhang Xiaohu and Ming Qing had different opinions. Zhang Xiaohu thought that this was the territory of the Misty School and should be guarded by the disciples of the Misty School. However, Ming Qing thought that it was his subordinates who captured the Righteous Alliance members. Naturally, his subordinates should be guarding them. Furthermore, his subordinates were also disciples of the Misty School. How could they not guard them? Zhang Xiaohu had no way to refute. He also didn't put on the airs of a leader and could only agree. Next was how to deal with the Righteous Alliance members. Zhang Xiaohu had seen the evil deeds of the Righteous Alliance members in the ethereal heights many years ago. Naturally, he wanted to cripple these disciples' martial arts once and for all. His reason was that the Righteous Alliance was about to launch a counterattack. If they were left alive, there would be people left to guard them. Even if they were rescued by the Righteous Alliance, they would still be strong opponents. However, Ming Qing objected. He thought that after these Righteous Alliance members were captured, they would definitely become qualified disciples of the Misty School. Even if they couldn't, they should still be escorted back to the Fragrant Cult and become disciples of the Fragrant Cult. There was no reason to cripple their martial arts. The two of them couldn't agree. Furthermore, Jingyi Shirtai had appointed Ming Qing to be in charge of martial arts and killing. These captives should be managed by Ming Qing. Zhang Xiaohu could only angrily stay in the meeting hall. He allowed Ming Qing and Gao Kunheng to laugh as they went out to deal with the Righteous Alliance captives. Sigh, I knew it. It's not easy to be the leader of the Misty School. Beside him, Qinshan said softly, Senior, if you're not happy with it, let Martial Uncle Wen take over. What are you talking about? Changgu scolded from the side. Little Tiger is inexperienced. Ming Qing and Gao Kunheng can only be Little Tiger's whetstone. In 1 year or 3 years, Little Tiger will definitely stand out and take control of the Misty School. Seeing Changgu so confident, Zhang Xiaohu shook his head slightly. Changgu, the Misty School is now the puppet of the Fragrant Cult. I'm the puppet of the puppets. Even if I want to fight with the Fragrant Cult, I don't have the capital. Capital? Changgu rolled his eyes and smiled. Martial Uncle Li, Martial Uncle Lu, and Martial Uncle Wen aren't your capital? Ren Jingyi is a sly old fox. She definitely didn't expect you to have these trump cards, right? Moreover, didn't Martial Uncle who also bring some Misty School members outside? When they get the news and return to the Misty School, won't our power be even stronger? Won't you have more trump cards? But the problem is, how do Martial Uncle Li and the others compare to Martial Uncle Jingyi and the others? Zhang Xiaohu smiled bitterly. You saw it today. We had the upper hand at first, but when the 5 from the Righteous Alliance appeared, we immediately fell into a disadvantageous position. If not for the help of the Immortals, the outcome would have been completely different. -4. Chapter 1077. Of course, I know that. Chang'e blinked and smiled. But don't you still have the most powerful trump card? Xiaohua. The corners of Zhang Xiaohu's mouth curled into a smile. Although he's powerful and given enough time, he might be able to defeat Abbess Jingyi, but he's still young. He's only been practicing martial arts for 5 years. If we only rely on him, I'm afraid it won't work. Xiaohu, did you really not realize? Chang'e couldn't help asking. Realize? Zhang Xiaohu looked up at the sky outside the meeting hall and said in a low voice, I'm just guessing. I don't dare to associate Xiaohua with that immortal. Qinshan also said in a low voice, yes, senior sister. Although that immortal can fly and so can Zhang Xiaohua, but the two of them don't look like each other, and there's a huge difference in their height. I've heard of the art of disguise in the martial arts world, but I've never heard of it being able to change a person's height. But he's an immortal after all. Does he have any supernatural powers that we don't know about? Chang'e asked tentatively. If Xiaohua has such supernatural powers, there's no reason why Nun Jingyi can't. Zhang Xiaohu shook his head. I've never heard of Nun Jingyi being able to change her appearance. Senior brother, senior sister, don't make wild guesses. When you see Zhang Xiaohua, why don't you just ask her directly? Qinshan smiled. By the way, senior brother, I heard that your home is not far from Pingyang City. Is Zhang Xiaohua at home now? Let's go and see. With that, her face was slightly flushed. How could Zhang Xiaohu not know Qinshan's thoughts? He smiled bitterly. I haven't been back for many years. I really want to see my father and mother, but look at the Misty School now. There are so many things waiting to be done. As the leader, how can I leave? Moreover, Grandmaster Li, Grandmaster Lu, Miss O, my master, and Uncle Shui are coming back. How can I leave? Speaking of this, he asked again, Chang'e, when will master and the others arrive? Chang'e thought for a moment and said, soon, probably in 7 or 8 days. Chin Chin, on the other hand, was dejected. Just as he was about to speak, he heard a burst of noise outside. An extremely pleasant voice shouted, Faction Leader Zhang, you must seek justice for the disciples of my Mingta clan. Zhang Xiaohu frowned and looked up. He saw Auntie Qin charging in angrily, followed by Du Feng and Ding Chao. Behind her were Ming Qing and Gao Kunheng, whose expressions were strange. They exchanged glances as they walked in. Hallmaster Qin, why are you so angry? Zhang Xiaohu looked at Aunt Qin sitting on the chair and asked curiously, Vice Gang Leader Ming and Vice Gang Leader Gao just went out. You can ask them. Hallmaster Qin said bluntly. Zhang Xiaohu looked at the angry Aunt Qin and frowned slightly. He could only turn his head to look at Ming Qing and Gao Kunheng. Deputy Sect Masters, why are you doing this? Ming Qing and Gao Kunheng looked at each other and said in unison, since Hallmaster Qin complained, it's better for her to say it. Instantly, Zhang Xiaohu's face was as cold as frost. He said in a low voice, could it be that no one has told me what happened? Aunt Qin was a little regretful. Zhang Xiaohu was a disciple of the Misty School after all. She had made things difficult for him by throwing a tantrum. However, at this point, she could only give Du Feng a look. Du Feng ignored her and stood up. He cupped his hands and said, reporting to faction leader Zhang, it's like this. Then, Du Feng recounted everything that had happened in detail. It turned out that after capturing the disciples of the Righteous Alliance, some of the disciples of the Fragrance Cult had sealed their acupoints one by one and escorted them to dungeons or rooms. Most of the disciples of the Fragrance Cult had eaten their fill and rested. However, Misty Mountain Villa was the base of the Misty School. Although there were many disciples of the Fragrance Cult, they weren't familiar with Misty Mountain Villa. On the way to attack, they had only paid attention to their whereabouts and talked about the key points of the attack. As for where they could rest and where they couldn't, they didn't mention it clearly. After a life and death battle, the disciples of the Fragrance Cult had finally escaped and survived. Some of the disciples couldn't help but sigh. When they were eating and drinking, they drank a little too much. Wine is a matchmaker. Wine strengthens one's courage. These old sayings were true. When the disciples of the Fragrance Cult drank too much, it was inevitable that they would become restless. Therefore, these disciples couldn't help but be a little rude to the female disciples of the Misty School's Mingtsue Hall. This was a small matter. When Aunt Qin heard the disciples' report, she could only suppress her anger in her heart. She only ordered her disciples to hide far away and rest early. However, when night fell, one of the Fragrance Cult disciples drank too much and couldn't find his way back. He wandered around and happened to meet a female disciple of the Mingtsue Hall. The Fragrance Cult disciple had eaten a leopard's guts. In an instant, he had evil thoughts and reached out to seal the female disciple's acupoints. The female disciple was caught off guard. Secondly, her martial arts weren't good enough to begin with. She was restrained in an instant and didn't even have the chance to scream. Fortunately, when the female disciple was turned into a little white sheep and was about to be ravaged, she bumped into a Misty School disciple. That disciple immediately shouted and went forward to stop him. The Fragrance Cult disciple flew into a rage out of humiliation and wanted to kill the Misty School disciple. However, when he severely injured the Misty School disciple, the Misty School disciples who heard the cries from afar had already arrived. The Fragrance Cult disciple wanted to resist stubbornly, but there were too many of them and he was about to be captured. However, at this moment, not only did the Misty School disciples hear the cries, the Fragrance Cult disciples also arrived. When they saw the situation, they didn't say anything and first rescued the Fragrance Cult disciple and even injured a few of the Misty School disciples. When Aunt Qin heard this, she was naturally furious. She immediately went out to look for them. However, she couldn't find them. Coincidentally, she bumped into Ming Qing and Gao Kunheng and asked them for them. The two of them didn't know the reason, and when they asked someone else, they could only refuse. In a fit of anger, Aunt Qin dragged the two of them to the discussion hall. After hearing Du Feng's words, Zhang Xiaohu's eyes were spitting fire. He thought about what Qinjian had done to him in the past. Wasn't he also plotting against Chang'e? The female disciples of Mingcue Hall were his senior and junior sisters. They were no different from Chang'e and Chen Shun. What was the difference between them being humiliated by the disciples of the fragrant cult and him being humiliated? It was no wonder that Aunt Qin was angry. Even Chang'e and Chen Shun, who were next to him, looked angry. Deputy faction leader Ming, is what Du Feng said true? Zhang Xiaohu asked coldly. Ming Qing was a little embarrassed, but he still nodded and said, "Yes, faction leader Zhang, it is true." Then, where is that disciple? What's his name? Has he been captured? This, reporting to faction leader Zhang, that disciple's name is Wang Dong. Because he is drunk, he has fallen asleep. I have already sent someone to watch over him. Bang! Zhang Xiaohu slapped the armrest of the chair and said angrily, Wang Dong committed such a crime and can still sleep peacefully. How can this be? Deputy faction leader Ming, why aren't you arresting him? Ming Qing frowned and said, Faction leader Zhang, please calm down. Wang Dong did commit a crime, but he was drunk and did not commit any serious crimes. Moreover, Wang Dong is a meritorious person of the Misty School. He has just captured the disciples of the Righteous Alliance. If we punish him now, I'm afraid, won't it hurt the hearts of the disciples of the fragrant cult? Zhang Xiaohu heard and said coldly, then what does Deputy Faction Leader Ming mean? Ming Qing thought for a moment and said, I've only just heard the whole story. This is just my first thought. If there's anything wrong, please advise me, Sect Leader Zhang. Tell me. Zhang Xiaohu was expressionless. Yes. Reporting to Faction Leader Zhang, I think Wang Dong has committed a crime. Although he was drunk, considering that he is a meritorious person of the Misty School, can we atone for his crime? Can we first give him a few dozen strokes to offset his punishment? Zhang Xiaohu bit his lip and did not express his opinion. He continued to ask, anything else? Also, I think that although Wang Dong did not ruin the reputation of the female disciple, her reputation is still worrisome. In the future, the female disciple will not be able to meet anyone. Why don't we turn a bad thing into a good thing and persuade the female disciple to marry Wang Dong? What do you think, Faction Leader Zhang Xiaohu? Ming Qing's eyes flashed as he looked at Zhang Xiaohu. That's a one-sided idea. Zhang Xiaohu was so angry that he laughed and said, I'd like to ask Deputy Faction Leader Ming what the first rule of the fragrant cult is. Those who betray their hearts will be killed. Ming Qing said without hesitation. However, this is not the fragrant cult. Moreover, Wang Dong did not betray the female disciple. Faction Leader Zhang, don't be mistaken. Of course I'm not mistaken. However, the fourth rule of the Misty School also states that those who take liberties with female disciples will be killed. I wonder if Deputy Faction Leader Ming knows? Zhang Xiaohu said coldly. Ming Qing rolled his eyes and said with a smile, I'm slow-witted. I just entered ethereal heights today. Is there such a rule? I really don't know. Then I'll tell you now. Do you know? Of course I know, Ming Qing said innocently. Ming Qing said innocently, but I only just found out. I reckon Wang Dong himself still doesn't know. Deputy Faction Leader Ming, do you mean that those who don't know can't be blamed? Zhang Xiaohu asked. That's not what I meant. Faction Leader Zhang, don't make wild guesses. I just think that although Wang Dong made a mistake, it didn't cause any consequences. Moreover, he really doesn't know this rule. Please think carefully. Don't disappoint our brothers and say that Faction Leader Zhang is using a chicken feather as a token of authority. You. Zhang Xiaohu was furious and stood up. Gao Kunheng saw this and immediately stood up. He cupped his hands and said, Faction Leader Zhang, please calm down. Please listen to my opinion. What do you think? Zhang Xiaohu took a deep breath and nodded. Go ahead. I think that we focused on attacking ethereal heights today and ignored the announcement of the faction's rules. This caused some of the new Misty School disciples to be at a loss and think that there are no rules to restrict them. I reckon Wang Dong is like that. Therefore, We can't put all the blame on Wang Dong. As faction leaders, you, I, and Deputy Faction Leader Ming also have some responsibility. Therefore, I think that from now on, we should restore the Misty School's Commandment Hall and explain the faction's rules and commandments to the Misty School disciples, especially the new ones. As for the previous ones, I'm a little inclined to Deputy Faction Leader Ming's opinion. We haven't restored the faction's rules yet. Of course, we can't use the current faction's rules to restrict and punish the Misty School disciples who made mistakes in the past. Don't you think so? Faction Leader Zhang? Please cast a monthly vote, a recommendation vote, a collection, a tip. Thank you. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian.com to cast a recommendation vote or monthly vote. -4. Chapter 1078. Zhang Xiaohu nodded slightly and turned to Ding Chao. Ding Chao, you're an old member of Ethereal Sect. I'm sure you're familiar with Ethereal Sect's rules. Now that there are many things waiting to be done, it's time for you to contribute to our sect. I hereby appoint you as the Deputy Hall Master of the Law Enforcement Hall. You will be in charge of all law enforcement matters in the Misty School. Ding Chao was overjoyed. He bowed and said, I will do my best to revitalize the Misty School. When Zhang Xiaohu heard that, he waved his hand and said, You are still young and do not have the experience of being a Hall Master. Therefore, I will appoint you as the Vice Hall Master first. Pick out some of the outstanding martial arts from the Ethereal Sect disciples and those who are upright and upright. When the time is right, I will naturally appoint you as the Hall Master. Ding Chao thanked him and said, My virtue is shallow. I am grateful to be valued by Grand Faction Leader Zhang. How could I dare to ask for more? Ming Qing and Gao Kunheng looked at each other and felt a little regretful. On the way to the Ethereal Mountain Villa, Zhang Xiaohu had already vaguely mentioned to them that he wanted to establish the various halls of the Ethereal Sect. This was an important moment for the Ethereal Sect to rearrange. Of course, the two of them had some plans in their hearts. Therefore, they had been shirking their responsibilities and wanted to wait until they had taken down the Ethereal Mountain Villa before discussing it. Who knew that such a thing would happen? Now that Zhang Xiaohu had appointed Ding Chao as the Deputy Hall Master of the Law Enforcement Hall, it was a matter of course. Zhang Xiaohu glanced at the two of them and turned to Du Feng and said, Junior Du, when we were at Shixin Peak, you always worked hard without complaint. You did your best to deal with the various halls of the Misty School and earned a lot of benefits for the Misty School. Now that the Misty School is being rebuilt, the Deputy Hall Master of the Law Enforcement Hall is suitable for Junior Du. Would Junior Du be willing to share my burden? Without waiting for Du Feng to speak, Gao Kunheng hurriedly said, Grand Faction Leader Zhang, you can't. The corner of Zhang Xiaohu's eyes twitched. He smiled and said, Deputy Gang Leader Feng, why not? Gao Kunheng thought for a moment and glanced at Ming Qing. He cupped his hands and said, Sect Leader, the revival of our Misty School is all thanks to the disciples of Wuming Hall of Incense Cult. If Sect Leader Zhang only rewards the disciples of Misty School, it will inevitably cause dissatisfaction among the people. They will say that Sect Leader Zhang favors one over the other. I'm afraid it will be detrimental to the development of Misty School in the future. Anything else? Zhang Xiaohu asked calmly. Gao Kunheng shook his head. Yes, Deputy Gang Leader Ming and Deputy Gang Leader Feng. Today's conflict between the disciples of the two sects shows that the sect's rules and communication are lacking. I appointed Ding Chao to establish new rules, and appointed Du Feng to establish effective communication between the disciples of the two sections. This will reduce friction and eliminate prejudice. Don't you think it's very appropriate? Without waiting for the two to speak, Zhang Xiaohu continued, Moreover, Du Feng and Ding Chao are the ethereal twins of Misty School. If I only appointed Ding Chao and not Du Feng, wouldn't the disciples of Misty School say that I'm unfair? Ming Qing and Gao Kunheng's noses were almost crooked from anger. Zhang Xiaohu repeatedly said that he was afraid that the disciples of Misty School would say that he was unfair, but Zhang Xiaohu did not mention a single word about the unfair that the two had just mentioned. Moreover, the Divine Mechanics Hall has the function of gathering information and transmitting information. If I don't establish the Divine Mechanics Hall in time, how will my Misty School establish contact with the other Misty School disciples? How will they return to Ethereal Mountain Villa? If I don't establish the Divine Mechanics Hall in time, how will I gather information about the alliance of righteous sects and guard against their invasion? But my Wuming Hall disciples also have outstanding people who can take up the position of Deputy Hall Master of the Divine Mechanics Hall. Ming Qing could not help but argue. Yes, of course there are elites in Wuming Hall, but didn't Deputy Gang Leader Ming just say that? The disciples of Wuming Hall have just entered Misty School and are not familiar with the Misty School. If I rashly promote these disciples who are not familiar with the Misty School to the upper echelons of the Misty School, not only will it be irresponsible to my Misty School, but it will also be irresponsible to those elite disciples. Ming Qing was at a loss for words. All right, this matter is settled. If Wuming Hall, oh no, Misty School's new disciples are extremely outstanding, you can recommend them at any time. Of course, I will make an exception for them. Thank you, Gang Leader Zhang. Du Feng was also happy. He bowed and said, I will definitely work hard for Misty School until my death. Haha, Misty School's twin beauties, each of you has your own achievements. This is all due to your own efforts. You don't have to thank me. Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand. Ming Qing and Gao Kunheng's expressions were uncertain, but they endured it. After all, the two halls only had deputy hall masters. The hall masters had not been decided yet, so it was hard to say who would be in charge. All right. Now that all the miscellaneous matters have been dealt with, let's talk about Wang Dong. Wang Dong. Ming Qing was stunned and almost blurted out. He thought that what Zhang Xiaohu said just now was to let Wang Dong go, but who knew? The matter was not over yet. What else do you have to say about Wang Dong? I will listen to gang leader's teachings. Ming Qing said coldly. Deputy Hall Master Ming said it well. If I punish Wang Dong, I will hurt the hearts of the Wuming Hall disciples. But have you thought about it? If I don't punish Wang Dong, how can I face the Misty School disciples? Won't I hurt the hearts of the Misty School disciples even more? Do you think I can still sit in the position of Misty Sect's sect master? Zhang Xiaohu's words were heavier and louder than the previous. By the time he was done, apart from Gao Kunheng and Ming Qing, all the other ethereal sect disciples were so excited that they almost clapped and cheered. Ming Qing glanced at Zhang Xiaohu and then at Gao Kunheng. He clenched his teeth and shook his head. Wang Dong was a Wuming Hall disciple previously. Our leader gave him to me. I don't dare to let others judge him. Ha. Zhang Xiaohu laughed. Is Wang Dong a Wuming Hall disciple or a Misty School disciple now? Of course he is a Misty School disciple. Ming Qing hesitated but still nodded. Then, I am the Misty School's gang leader. Do I have the authority to punish Wang Dong, a Misty School disciple? Zhang Xiaohu asked immediately. Of course you can, but... Ming Qing wanted to continue but was interrupted by Zhang Xiaohu. There are no buts. Even if Wang Dong was wronged, I can still punish him. Ming Qing's eyes narrowed. He thought for a while and said coldly, of course gang leader Zhang can punish him, but if gang leader Zhang doesn't punish him properly, I have the authority to stop the law enforcement hall. Let's see who dares to be arrogant in front of me. Zhang Xiaohu frowned as well. After deciphering Ming Qing's meaning, he retorted, Vice Sect Master Ming, are you implying that if the disciples of the Hall of Justice execute my orders, you're going to bring out your status as Ethereal Sect's Vice Sect Master to stop them? I'm only saying, if the punishment is unfair. Ming Qing didn't back down. Deputy Gang Leader Ming is the Misty School's Deputy Gang Leader. Of course you can bully others and make the law enforcement hall not dare to do anything. But what if I do it myself? Zhang Xiaohu's eyes narrowed as well. He stared at Ming Qing. Ming Qing was secretly happy. He glanced at Gao Kunheng and said with a smile, since gang leader Zhang said that I'm bullying others by stopping the law enforcement hall, the law enforcement hall won't dare to overstep their boundaries. If gang leader Zhang does it yourself, that's even more bullying. Of course, I won't dare to overstep my boundaries. But, does gang leader Zhang really want to do it himself? Gao Kunheng said worriedly, Wang Dong is a disciple of the Wuming Hall and his martial arts are very good. If gang leader Zhang brings people there, it's inevitable that the original Wuming Hall will have a common enemy. It's not good for the harmony between the two factions. But if gang leader Zhang goes there alone, if Wang Dong is driven to desperation and hurts gang leader Zhang, we will be letting down Sir Leader Zhang's trust. Ha ha ha. Zhang Xiaohu looked up and laughed. A real man has things to do and things not to do. Since I'm the Misty School's deputy gang leader, there are some things that I have to do. If I can't even get revenge for the humiliation of Mingcue Hall's junior sister and have to give her away, I might as well die in front of the Misty School's disciples and give them a proper image. And isn't this what some people want? As soon as he said this, everyone in the hall was shocked. Chang'e and Chen Qin's faces were full of panic. But this was the meeting hall. There was no place for them to speak. They could only watch anxiously, their hearts aching silently. Aunt Qin, Du Feng, and Ding Chao were all shocked. They immediately wanted to say, "Deputy Gang Leader, please reconsider," but just as they reached their mouths, they swallowed their words. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohu's aura was at its peak. Their words would be a blow to the Misty School's aura. Good. Ming Qing was very agreeable when he heard this. Even Gao Cunheng, who was beside him, smiled. Ming Qing clapped his hands and said, "I didn't expect Deputy Gang Leader Zhang to be such a hot-blooded man. I really admire you. If Deputy Gang Leader Zhang makes a move, I definitely won't dare to stop you. Moreover, I'll definitely restrain the disciples of Wuming Hall to protect Deputy Gang Leader Zhang's dignity. It's just that Wang Dong is drunk. If we let Deputy Gang Leader Zhang go now, first, we won't be able to show Deputy Gang Leader Zhang's bravery. Second, we won't be able to give Wang Dong a fair chance. This is quite difficult." Even now, Gao Cunheng didn't forget to add insult to injury. "No matter." Zhang Xiaohu waved his hand. 7 days later, I'll personally punish Wang Dong. 7 days? Ming Qing and Gao Cunheng were stunned. Then, they nodded. "We'll follow Deputy Gang Leader's orders. I'm sure Wang Dong will have sobered up in 7 days. Ignoring their sarcasm, Zhang Xiaohu waved his hand and said, "You can leave first. I still have things to discuss with the 2 newly appointed Deputy Hall Masters." Yes, Ming Qing and Gao Cunheng were very pleased with themselves. They bowed and were about to leave when Zhang Xiaohu said, "Oh, also, I'll be in seclusion to cultivate in these 7 days. I'll need the 2 deputy gang leaders to take care of the matters in the gang. Don't let this hard-won victory go down the drain." Ming Qing and Gao Cunheng didn't understand what Zhang Xiaohu meant, but they still nodded. -4. Chapter 1079. After Ming Qing and Gao Cunheng had walked far away, the anxious Chang'e and Chen Chun were at a loss for words. Their brows were furrowed and their eyes were filled with worry. Madame Qin looked at Zhang Xiaohu for a while and sighed. "Master Zhang, actually, it doesn't have to be like this. Why do you have to sacrifice your life?" Madame Qin's attitude towards Zhang Xiaohu was obvious. If it weren't for Chang'e, she wouldn't have cared about Zhang Xiaohu at all. As for Zhang Xiaohu becoming the master of Misty School, she felt even more uncomfortable. Madame Qin knew that she could at most be a deputy master of Misty School, but Li Jian and the others' martial arts had been destroyed. When one Hai and the others' martial arts had also been destroyed, she was still the deputy master of Misty School. When Misty School was re-established, she was still the master of Mingcue Hall and didn't advance any further. On the other hand, Zhang Xiaohu was just a villager. He was only accepted as a disciple by Wen Hai and became the chief disciple of Misty School by chance. Now he could become her master. She couldn't help but feel uncomfortable with such a change in status. Therefore, from Shishine Peak to Misty Heights, Madame Qin and Zhang Xiaohu spoke no more than 10 sentences. She also intended to tell Zhang Xiaohu about today's matter and see how Zhang Xiaohu would deal with it. Madame Qin expected that Zhang Xiaohu would either settle things peacefully and have a good discussion with Ming Qing so that Ming Qing would compromise, or he would use Nanjingyi to pressure Ming Qing with his status as the master of Misty School and force Ming Qing to compromise. But no matter what, even if the final outcome was not as severe as Gao Cunheng's, Wang Dong would definitely not be severely punished. The only one who was hurt was the female disciple from Mingcue Hall. as well as a few innocent Misty School disciples who were hurt. This was because in Aunt Chin's heart, the Misty School's disciples were the weaker party. While the Fragrance Cult's disciples were the strongest, Zhang Xiaohu had to rely on the Fragrance Cult's disciples to maintain his position as the leader of the Misty School and abandon the Misty School's disciples. Wasn't this Nun Jingyi's wishful thinking? However, the current situation was definitely out of Aunt Qin's expectations. Even Du Feng and Ding Chao had a whole new level of respect for Zhang Xiaohu. The two of them knew that if they were the ones handling it, it would definitely not be like this. Therefore, Aunt Qin was completely convinced when she addressed him as Leader Zhang. She even changed the way she addressed him to you. Zhang Xiaohu looked at Aunt Qin, then at Du Feng and Ding Chao. He waved his hand and laughed heartily. I am indebted to my fellow junior brothers and martial uncles for thinking so highly of me and making me the chief disciple of the Misty School. How could I not work hard for the Misty School? Actually, in my heart, being the chief disciple of the Misty School is more important than being the leader of the Misty School that Nun Jingyi of the Incense Cult gave me. There is a saying in my hometown, if an official doesn't make decisions for the people, it's better to go home and sell sweet potatoes. It's perfectly said. If I can't be the chief disciple and make decisions for the Misty School's disciples, how could I still have the face to sit on the chair of the Misty School's gang leader? Aunt Qin, Du Feng, and Ding Chao's faces turned cold. They all stood up and bowed. Leader Zhang is righteous and righteous. We understand. In the future, we will follow Leader Zhang's lead and revitalize the Misty School. Zhang Xiaohu nodded. He stood up and also saluted. Revitalizing the Misty School is not a matter of time. In the future, I will need everyone's cooperation. Only then will we be able to restore the glory of our Misty School as a great immortal sect. Then, he said, I will be leaving Misty Mountain Villa in a while. If anything happens in the sect, I will need the three of you to take care of it. Mingqing and Gao Kunhing, of course, they will also take care of the sect's affairs. However, there are many things in our Misty School that we have to take care of ourselves. However, I estimate that after what happened just now, there won't be any changes in the next 7 days. As for the Alliance of Righteous Tao, they won't have much of a reaction in the short term either. Leader Zhang, this is... Aunt Qin tried to probe. Nothing else. Zhang Xiaohu didn't want to say more. If they ask, just say that I went into seclusion. Yes, Aunt Qin said respectfully. Then, Aunt Qin, Du Feng, and Ding Chao all turned around and left the meeting hall. After everyone left, Changgu said faintly, Xiaohu, even if we can't sit on the position of the Misty School's leader, we can just not sit on it. Why should we put our lives on the line? Although your martial arts improve by leaps and bounds, compared to the disciples of Wuming Hall, there is still a big gap. If, at this time next year, I won't dissuade you. But now, why do you have to do this? Qinshin didn't speak, but her big eyes showed her mood. She looked at Zhang Xiaohu without blinking, with both longing and love. Sigh, Changgu, I know what you mean. However, do you think that if tonight's matter wasn't like this, what better way do I have? Suppress Ming Qing and capture Wang Dong? Or did he forcefully suppress Auntie Qin and make this matter disappear? Changgu shook her head slightly. Both were impossible. Maybe let Du Feng and Ding Chao do it for you? Chun Chan bit her lips and said hesitantly, Haha, forget it. Let's not talk about it. Since things have come to this and I have made a decision, let's leave it to fate. Zhang Xiaohu waved his hand and said with a smile, Now, the two of you, are you willing to go back to the Guozhuang house with me? Although Zhang Xiaohu's voice was very light, in the ears of Changgu and Chen Chun, it was like thunder in the clear sky. Changgu and Chen Chun immediately blushed. Chen Chun was even more surprised. She peeped at Changgu and murmured, It's right for senior brother to go back with senior sister Changgu. Why should I go? Changgu was first embarrassed, and then she realized. The red tide on her face disappeared, and she even turned pale. She had always wanted to hear Zhang Xiaohu say this. Even when she asked Zhang Xiaohu tentatively just now, Zhang Xiaohu said that he was busy with the gang and it was inappropriate for him to go back now. But in a moment, Zhang Xiaohu changed his mind and said that he would take them back to the Guozhuang house. Well, it was them. Not only her, but also Changgu. This what did it mean? Changgu clenched her fists, bit her lips, and said with a sad smile, "Of course, as long as Mr. Zhang wants, I will never refuse." Senior sister? Chun Chun heard the farewell in Chang Ji's words and was stunned. She looked up and saw Chang Ji's sad eyes. Her heart tightened. Changgu glanced at Zhang Xiaohu and then at Chin Chun. She reached out and held Chun Chin's little hand. She pursed her lips and said, "Little Chin Chun, now, you have grown up. I know your feelings for Xiaohu, but who is willing to share their lover with others? Although you grew up with me, but I also feel a little uncomfortable." Then she looked at Zhang Xiaohu and said, "Xiaohu has me in his heart and seems to have feelings for you. To be honest, I didn't want to agree so easily. It's just that, since my dear Zhang is willing to sacrifice his life for the sake of the ethereal sect, how can I reject this little thought of his?" Senior sister. Chun Chin's face was hot, but she was stunned when she heard the last part. "Let's go, Chun Chun. It's the same as when Mr. Zhang and I went to the Guozhuang house. Maybe we won't have a good ending, but we can see Mr. Zhang's parents. Don't blame us for knowing Mr. Zhang." Ah? Chun Chin finally understood. It turned out that this trip to the Guozhuang house was a farewell. Her heart ached and tears almost fell from her eyes. She murmured, "Is there no other way?" "No." Zhang Xiaohu forced a smile and said, "In 7 days, Grandmaster Li and the others will be back. Master will also be there. How can there not be a good way? We're just going back to the Guozhuang house. I haven't been back for several years, and I always see my mother in my dreams. I'm anxious to go back and see her." Changgu knew that this matter could not be settled peacefully, so she comforted Chin Chun. "If Mr. Zhang says it's okay, then it's okay. If little Chun Chun doesn't want to go to the Guozhuang house, Mr. Zhang and I won't force you." "Senior sister," Chin Chun said strangely, when did I say that I won't go with senior brother?" As she spoke, her face turned red again. At night, 3 black shadows used lightness skill to jump out of the Misty Mountain Villa. Because it was the first day of taking over the Misty Mountain Villa, the disciples of the Misty School did not set up a very strict defense, so no one knew. 2 days later, in the Guozhuang house, Zhang Xiaohua was playing with Zhang Byron at the entrance of the village. Beside them were Ji Xiaohua, Xiaohe, and Xiaohuang. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua raised her head and looked in the direction of Lu Town. She smiled and said, "They came so fast. I thought it would take at least half a month." Then she said to Ji Xiaohua, "Apprentice, go with you? Forget it. Tell my mother to quickly prepare pancakes and shrimp rolls." Ji Xiaohua was stunned, but she did not dare to ask more. She just nodded and said, "Yes, master." Then, she turned around and entered the village. Seeing Ji Xiaohua go back obediently, Zhang Xiaohua laughed and said, "Ha ha ha, it feels good to be a master." "Master, master, master," Zhang Byron next to her heard and also raised his head and shouted. "Yes, yes, yes." Zhang Xiaohua responded several times and said angrily, "You call me every day. How can I not answer? I am the first disciple of Beidou School." Xiaohua, Xiaohua. A series of voices came from the entrance of the village. "What's the matter, mother?" "Mother." Zhang Xiaohua raised her head and answered with a smile. Do you want to eat pancakes and shrimp rolls, or?" Guosufei said with uncertainty. "Ahem, mother. When did you know that I like to eat pancakes and shrimp rolls?" Zhang Xiaohua rubbed her nose and said, "That is second brother's strong suit." "Your second brother is back?" Guosufei confirmed her guess and said with surprise, "Where is he?" "Soon. He will probably be back around noon." "Ah, noon?" Guosufei looked at the sky and could not believe it. "Apprentice, quickly go to the river and catch some shrimp. When your martial uncle comes back, have a drink with him. Oh, right, catch 2 loaches too. Your martial uncle also brought 2 mistresses. Loaches are very good at nourishing yin and strengthening yang energy." "Yes, master." Ji Xiaohua answered honestly and walked towards the river at the entrance of the village in a serious manner. "What? There are 2 more girls?" Guosufei could not hold back and did not care about what Zhang Xiaohua said. She muttered and quickly turned around. Please vote. -4. Chapter 1080. Seeing the outline of the Guozhuang house in the distance, Zhang Xiaohu's eyes were a little hot. When he left the Guozhuang house several years ago, he was full of regret. He hated that he couldn't protect his younger brother and let his parents worry about him. At that time, he just wanted to get the news of his younger brother as soon as possible and didn't think too much. However, in the blink of an eye, several years had passed. There was news of his younger brother, and he was probably at home now. As for himself, although he had a certain position, but this position was mostly a puppet. Moreover, he returned home at such a helpless time. Mr. Zhang? Is that the Guozhuang house in front? Since leaving the ethereal heights, Chang'e no longer called Zhang Xiaohu Jr. brother. She didn't even call him Xiaohu. She only called him Mr. Zhang. How could Zhang Xiaohu not know the determination behind Chang'e's name? He felt sweet and painful in his heart. Well, yes, that's the Guozhuang house. The place where I was born and raised, Zhang Xiaohu murmured. It looks very ordinary, senior brother. Chen Chun was embarrassed to call him Mr. Zhang, so she had to call him senior brother. However, Chang'e also knew her thoughts. It was no different from Chang'e's own decision. The mountain is famous not because of its height, but because of its immortal. The water is famous not because of its depth, but because of its dragon. Chang'e said with a smile, this Guozhuang house will be famous in the world in the future. Zhang Xiaohu looked at the two women with a smile and said, if so, you will also be regarded as immortals. Chang'e's face was a little pale, but she also smiled. Only Qin Chun was puzzled. She looked up at the Guozhuang house in the distance. Zhang Xiaohu thought he would bring a surprise to his family in the Guozhuang house. However, before he went down the official road, he saw his father, mother, elder brother and sister-in-law, and his mysterious younger brother holding a child he had never seen before. They came out of the village entrance of the Guozhuang house. Zhang Xiaohu was shocked and looked back at Chang'e and Qin Chen. They got off their horses and ran to the front of the crowd with their lightness skills. Looking at his mother who was dressed up and his father who was dressed in new clothes, Zhang Xiaohu blurted out, Mother, which family are you going to have a wedding banquet? Haha, Zhang Xiaohu laughed first. He stepped forward, hugged Zhang Xiaohu and said, Haha, you are really back. Mother mentioned it just now. I thought it was a joke. Zhang Xiaohu also hugged his elder brother who was thinner and weaker than him. He was more surprised than the reunion. He asked curiously, You are here to pick up us? Yes, Zhang Xiaolong let go of Zhang Xiaohu and pulled his new clothes. He said, I heard that you brought two sisters-in-law back. Your sister-in-law insisted that I wear new clothes. She said it was the first time they came here. Ahem. Lu Qian next to him coughed twice. Zhang Xiaolong quickly stopped talking. Mother, father, I am back. Zhang Xiaohu looked at Guosufei and Zhang Kai and said, his eyes were hot, and he quickly bowed to them to hide the tears in his eyes. Son, Guosufei had already received the news that Zhang Xiaohu was coming back. She thought she was prepared and would not cry. However, when she saw her son who she had not seen for years and thought had died, she still could not control herself. She held Zhang Xiaohu's hand and burst into tears. Son's mother, Zhang Kai next to them carried Guosufei on his shoulder and pointed his chin at the two women behind Zhang Xiaohu who were blushing. Guosufei suddenly understood and quickly wiped the tears in her eyes and face with her sleeves. She put on a smile and said, Xiaohu, these two. Before Zhang Xiaohu introduced them, Chang'e came forward and bowed to them. She said, Mother, Zhang Xiaohu stared in shock. He knew that Chang'e had already made up her mind, but he still felt a bit of a fluke in his heart. He wanted to use the next few days to console her, but now that she was calling her mother, how could Chang'e possibly have a way out? He was deeply moved. Hearing Chang'e call her mother, Qin Chen blushed and said in a voice as low as an ant's, Mother. Guosufei was stunned at first, and then she was overjoyed. She looked at the two women's abdomens, Mother. Zhang Xiaohu was very perceptive. He called out, You are. In fact, not only Guosufei, but also Lu Qian had the same idea. In the countryside, the most important thing was the etiquette. If there were no etiquette, how could she directly call her mother? Chang'e and Qin Shan were people in Jianghu, so they probably did not know these things. Seeing Guosufei like this, They were quite panicked and afraid that they would forget some etiquette. They looked at their sweetheart and secretly asked for help. What could Zhang Xiaohu say? However, Zhang Xiaohua next to him snickered and said, "Mother, the disciples of the Misty School have been in ethereal heights since childhood and don't know the rules of our countryside. If you propose marriage, I'm afraid you have to ask Aunt Qin, the master of Mingcue Hall in ethereal heights." Then he said to the two women, "If you want to call her mother, I'm afraid you have to wait until we get married. Do you want to call her mother now? Isn't it too early?" Chang'e and Chun Chun blushed even more. Chang'e looked at them and went forward to salute Zhang Kai, saying, "Father." Chun Chen's face was so red that it was about to drip water, but she still called him. Zhang Kai was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. He raised his hands and said, "Get up, get up." Then he took something out of his sleeve. However, after a long time, he took nothing out. He didn't expect that the two daughters-in-law called him at the first meeting. How could they prepare a gift? Zhang Xiaohua was still the quick-witted one. She stretched out her hand and stuffed the copy of Like Water into her father's hands. She smiled and said, "Father, this is our Zhang family's betrothal gift. You can't be stingy." Zhang Kai took the secret manual that Zhang Xiaohua handed over and hesitated. He thought to himself, "I already told you not to be stingy. Why are you still giving me that lousy book? Don't you have a lot of gold, silver, and jewels? Can't you take out a box?" But his hand had already reached there, so he had to give it to them and said embarrassedly, "You too." Well, at this moment, everyone realized that the two women hadn't introduced their names. Even Zhang Xiaohua only said that there were two female disciples and didn't mention their names. Zhang Xiaohua immediately said with a smile, "Father, the one in front of you is beautiful but virtuous. She looks serious. She is my eldest sister-in-law, Chang'e. The one behind her is very pretty and shy. She is my youngest sister-in-law, Chen Chun." Hearing this, the two women were even more shy. "Well, Chang'e, Chun Chun, it's your first time to visit our Zhang family. This is a small gift. Take it first." As he said, Zhang Kai put water like flowing water in front of Chang'e. Hearing Zhang Xiaohua say that it was a betrothal gift, Chang'e was even more embarrassed to take it. She turned around and looked at Zhang Xiaohu. Zhang Xiaohu smiled and nodded slightly. Chang'e reached out to take it, but she immediately handed it to Chen Chen. Chen Chun took it. Seeing the 3 words on the cover, she knew it was a secret book of martial arts. She casually turned to the first page and was about to put it away, but when she saw the last few words, she couldn't help exclaiming. Of course, it was impolite to open a gift from an elder in front of others. But after all, Chen Chun was inexperienced and others didn't care about it. But her exclamation attracted everyone's attention. Chang'e frowned slightly and was about to scold her when Chen Chun stepped forward and whispered something in her ear. Hearing this, Chang'e's face changed greatly. She looked at Zhang Xiaohua with gratitude in her eyes, and then bowed to Zhang Kai and said, "Father, such a gift is really too precious." Chang'e is really grateful. But after saying this, she seemed to think of something and her eyes became a little sad again. At this time, not only Guosufei felt a little strange, but also Lu Qian was puzzled. It seemed that they were going to say goodbye to each other. It had to be said that a woman's sixth sense was very sensitive. Even Zhang Xiaohua, who was a cultivator of immortality, couldn't reach it. When Zhang Xiaohua was complacent, Zhang Kai waved his hand in astonishment and said, "No, Chang'e, it's too simple. It's too simple." Well, how could Zhang Kai know the meaning of like water for Chang'e and Chen Chun? Well, mother, father, hurry up and take the 2 sisters back to the house. Didn't you see that the villagers of Guozhuang House are coming out? Lu Qian said while thinking. Of course, the Zhang family came out in full force, which had already attracted the attention of others. Seeing Zhang Xiaohu come back in a neat suit with 2 valiant beauties, most of the people in Guozhuang House came out to watch the fun. "Go back to the house. Let's talk about it in the house." Although Guosufei said so, she didn't move. She was eager to stay at the entrance of the village for a while. In the past few years, she was frightened and the villagers often gossiped about her. Now her 2 sons came back, and her second son brought 2 daughters-in-law. How could she not be proud? Of course, She wanted to make the villagers envy her. How could Zhang Kai not know Guosufei's mood? Since he married into the Guozhuang house, it seemed that this was the only time he was most proud. He raised his little tail for a long time before he smiled and said, "Mother, let's go. Let the 3 children pay their respects to their mother first. It's better to welcome them. From Pingyang City to here. It's tiring." Of course, looking at the tired faces of Zhang Xiaohu and the other 2, Guosufei immediately felt sorry for them. She took the 3 of them and walked into the Guozhuang house. Along the way, the Guozhuang house was lively. The people around all looked at Zhang Xiaohu with admiration, and the 2 young ladies greeted Zhang Xiaohu politely. Presumably, after today, more young men would come back to Lu Town or Pingyang City to make a fortune. When Zhang Xiaohu saw that the Zhang family's courtyard was completely different, his heart was filled with emotions. He had been busy outside, but he had never brought any benefits to the family. The changes in the family must be the work of his father, elder brother, or younger brother. However, when he thought about the future, Zhang Xiaohu felt sad again. Once he entered the courtyard of the Zhang family, Zhang Xiaohu smelled the familiar fragrance and couldn't help but feel hungry. He forced a smile and said, "Mother, I haven't eaten your pancakes and river prawns for a long time. Why did you suddenly make this today? Elder brother and Xiaohua don't seem to eat much." "Haha, your younger brother said that you were coming back today, so I hurriedly made this. Luckily, I didn't delay things. Quickly wash your hands and go to the back to make a grave for your grandmother. You can eat it when you come back." "Xiaohua? He's so capable?" Zhang Xiaohu was surprised. He turned around and looked at Zhang Xiaohua, who was walking at the back and was still chatting with the villagers. Zhang Xiaohua sensed something and looked up at Zhang Xiaohu. She blinked at him and gave him 2 thumbs up, facing each other, as if she was kowtowing. "I'm going to faint." Zhang Xiaohu almost fell down. -4. Chapter 1081. Guosufei and Zhang Kai took Zhang Xiaohu, Chang'e, and Chen Shun to the back of the house to pay their respects to their grandmother. Lu Qian took Zhang Xiaolong and Ji Xiaohua to prepare food. Zhang Xiaohua didn't help. She held Zhang Byron in her arms and taught them how to walk. In the past few days, the 2 little things had gradually understood Zhang Xiaohua's meaning. They stayed on the ground or on Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder. They only flew in the air when there was no one around. Everything was ready. Guosufei and Lu Qian had been busy the entire morning, so they only needed to place the items on the table. Now that they had some free time, Lu Qian pulled Zhang Xiaohua to the side and whispered to him about her discovery. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head like a rattle drum and only said that she didn't believe it. Moreover, he also mentioned Zhang Xiaohu's current position as the sect master of the Misty sect. He was one of the few people in Jianghu. Although he was only a puppet, he still had the sect master of the incense cult behind him. What kind of trouble could make Chang'e act like that? Lu Qian believed in her own judgment and said, "If you don't believe me, you can ask Xiaohu himself." Obviously, Chang'e called his mother and father unexpectedly. "Is that so?" Zhang Xiaohua still didn't believe it. "Sigh, why don't you ask mother if she feels the same way as me? If she does, you have to ask her again. You and Little Tiger are the only ones in our family who roam the pugilistic world. We can't help you." "Well, I know, sister-in-law." Zhang Xiaohua nodded. While they were talking, Zhang Xiaohu returned with Guosufei and others. Mr. Lu also rushed over. Zhang Xiaohu, Chang'e, and Chen Chen also came forward to greet him. "Xiaohua, come out quickly and go to the mountain to get some spring water." Lu Qian shouted outside. "Yes," Xiaohua answered and was about to go out. "Xiaohua, didn't he call you?" Zhang Xiaohu was stunned and looked at Zhang Xiaohua in surprise. Hey. Zhang Xiaohua was very happy. She called out, "Disciple, come over and greet your 3 martial uncles." It was not until now that Zhang Xiaohua figured out that the term master's wife was not suitable for Chang'e and Chen Chen. It was really a mistake to address them as master's wife at the entrance of the village. Disciple? Seeing Zhang Xiaohua so complacent, Zhang Xiaohu, Chang'e, and Chen Chen were very surprised. They were even more surprised than when they heard Lu Qian ask Xiaohua to go out instead of Zhang Xiaohua. "Greetings, martial uncles." Xiaohuaji bowed politely. Oh, I remember. Zhang Xiaohu slapped his forehead and said, You are Ji Xiaohua. Xiaohua told me before. Martial uncle has a good memory. My name is Xiaohuaji, and I am now master's disciple. Xiaohuaji nodded. Well, there's no need for a greeting gift. Xiaohua, our Beidou school doesn't lack these things. Go get the water. Zhang Xiaohua boldly instructed Ji Xiaohua. Compared to Zhang Xiaohu, the leader of the Misty School, instructing the Misty School's disciples, it looked more proper. After Ji Xiaohua left, Qinshin said anxiously, Zhang Xiaohua, you're really going to establish a faction? Hee, I haven't established a faction yet. I just accepted a disciple. Zhang Xiaohuaji said proudly. What's so great about having a disciple? Qinshin pouted and looked at Zhang Xiaohuji. Senior has thousands of disciples. Hee, second sister-in-law, I have to correct you. First, I have a direct disciple. Does second brother have one? Second, I don't just have one disciple, I have two. Qinshin was embarrassed by Zhang Xiaohuaji calling her second sister-in-law, but she was still curious. Besides Ji Xiaohua, who else is there? Also this. Zhang Xiaohuaji raised Zhang Byron and said, This is the first disciple of our Beidou school. Him? Byron? Changgu and Qinshin already knew Byron's name, and they couldn't help but laugh. They all thought that Zhang Xiaohuaji was joking. Zhang Xiaohuaji knew that they didn't believe it, so she raised Zhang Byron and said, Byron, you see, your two new aunts don't believe it. Zhang Byron immediately raised his hands and said, Master, which made everyone laugh. During the meal, Changgu and Chen Shun showed the pride of children in Jianghu. They frequently raised their glasses to Zhang Kai and Mr. Liu, which was completely different from Lu Qian's quiet behavior. However, the two people's toasts showed the good manners of the Misty School. They were generous and courteous, which not only made Zhang Kai and Guosufei feel gratified, but also made Mr. Liu look at them in a new light. Although Zhang Xiaohuji was a good drinker, he didn't eat with his family for many years, so he was a little worried. Unexpectedly, he was a little drunk. When he spoke, it seemed that he was going to tell his family about the things after his death, which made Zhang Xiaohuaji frown. Zhang Xiaohuaji had to call her mother out and asked her in a low voice. Sure enough, Guosufei Ji had the same feeling as Lu Qian. No matter how generous the children in Jianghu were, they couldn't call their parents casually without a baby or betrothal gift. Well, Zhang Xiaohuaji nodded secretly and comforted her mother. When they returned to the table, the cups and plates were in a mess. After Zhang Xiaolong, Lu Qian, and Ji Xiaohuaji cleaned up the central room and made the Yunwu tea, the room became quiet. Zhang Xiaohu and the other two first praised the fragrance of the tea. After a few mouthfuls of the tea, the ethereal qi of heaven and earth washed the meridians of the three people. The drunkenness was gone, and Zhang Xiaohuji's eyes showed emptiness. Thinking of his gaffe just now, he was quite regretful, so he just lowered his head and didn't say anything. Chang'e and Chunshin also did the same. Seeing that their sweetheart didn't speak, they also lowered their heads and drank the tea, becoming silent gourds. Zhang Xiaohuaji glanced at Zhang Xiaolong, who coughed and said, Xiaohu, you came back just in time. A few days ago, Xiaohua came back and told us something. She wants to ask your opinion. What's the matter? Zhang Xiaohuji raised his head and asked. It's like this. Our Zhang family can't live in the Guozhuang house anymore. I heard from Xiaohua that your Misty School has a Huanxi villa, which is very good. My parents also agree. We are just waiting for you to come back. You see, Zhang Xiaohuji was stunned and panicked. He hurriedly said, Why? Isn't it good to live in the Guozhuang house? Why do you suddenly want to move to the Huanxi villa? It's like this. Zhang Xiaolongji told him about the bandits in Shizue Mountain, and then said with lingering fear, if Xiaohua hadn't come back that day, our family would have been burned to ashes. Even if you become a gang leader, you can't see us. Zhang Xiaohuji and others were shocked and turned to look at Zhang Xiaohuaji. Well, elder brother is right. If I didn't come back, I'm afraid you can't see your family now. Zhang Xiaohuaji nodded and said, Moreover, you are now the big gang leader of the Misty School. Your details will definitely be found out by the Righteous Alliance and other sections. Although the Jianghu morals don't allow them to do anything to your family, they can't rule out some sneaky actions. Therefore, I think it's no longer appropriate for my parents to live in the Guozhuang house. It's better to move to the Huanxi villa. We'll talk about this later. Since you're back now, I think it's better to solve it as soon as possible in case something happens. But Zhang Xiaohuji was very embarrassed and said, now there are many disciples of the aroma cult in the ethereal heights, and they don't listen to my orders. The Huanxi villa is the property of Miss O. I'm afraid I can't make the decision. Zhang Xiaohuaji frowned and said, second brother, do you mean you don't want us to go to Pingyang City? We can go to Pingyang City, but we don't have to go to the Huanxi villa. Zhang Xiaohuji said with a little guilty conscience. Second brother, are you hiding something from us? Zhang Xiaohua suddenly asked. No, it's nothing. Zhang Xiaohu shook his head in denial. Seeing her lover embarrassed, Chang'e changed the topic and asked, by the way, those bandits in Shizue Mountain were killed by Xiaohua, right? What about Shizue Mountain? Why don't we send a team of disciples to wipe out all the bandits in Shichui Mountain when we get back? I don't need it. All the bandits in West Chui Mountain were killed by Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaolong laughed. All killed? Chen Chen covered her mouth. Yes, those bandits of West Jade Mountain are subordinates of the Azure Flame Order, and the Azure Flame Order is a secret organization of the Righteous Tao Alliance. Zhang Xiaohua didn't hide anything. She told him everything that happened afterward and said, so, I killed Ban Fuguwei and the 4 consecrators that day. Ah? The 3 of them were even more surprised, as if they had seen a ghost. That immortal was really you? Of course. Zhang Xiaohua said proudly. Do you think that someone would help for no reason? But Chen Chen still didn't believe it and said, that immortal's face is much more handsome than yours, and he is also much shorter. Although he was in the air, but he could be seen clearly. Ha ha ha, disciple, I'll let you see how powerful your master is. Zhang Xiaohua's words were directed at Ji Xiaohua. Ji Xiaohua stood up from his chair and formed a hand seal. In just a moment, a handsome pan appeared in front of everyone. This, not only was Ji Xiaohua dumbfounded, but everyone in the central room was stunned. Only Zhang Byron still called, Master, Master. Immediately, Chang'e and Chun Chin's faces lit up with joy. Yes, almost ecstasy. They both stepped forward and said, Xiaohua, can you become your second brother? Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. Why become my second brother? Could it be that you want to hold 2 weddings at the same time? Bah! Chang'e spat. Even if your second brother and I agree, can Ye Qinyu and Ming agree? Second brother. Zhang Xiaohua shouted and looked at Zhang Xiaohu. She said, how can we talk about it now? Ye Qinyu? Meng? Who is it? Guosufei was stunned and quickly looked at Zhang Kai with a smile on her face. Zhang Xiaohua was furious. He walked in front of Zhang Xiaohu and reached out his hand to grab Zhang Xiaohu. Then, the 2 of them quickly changed positions. Immediately, 2 Zhang Xiaohu, who looked exactly the same, appeared in front of everyone. Ah? Everyone was shocked again. They were even more shocked than when they saw Pan just now. Which one of us is Zhang Xiaohu? One of the Zhang Xiaohu asked. Haha, Chang'e laughed. Do you still need to ask? It's definitely not you. -4. Chapter 1082. Don't we look the same? Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. No, it's exactly the same. Lu Qian smiled and said, but the clothes on Xiaohu must have been made by Sister Chang'e herself. How could she not recognize it? Zhang Xiaohua patted her head. Yes, she had changed her appearance, but her clothes hadn't. No matter how she disguised herself, she was still Zhang Xiaohua. After changing back to her original appearance, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, yes, my 2 sisters-in-law, you should be careful. When I find suitable clothes, you won't be able to tell me apart. Xiaohua, although you have changed your appearance, your senior brother is still your senior brother. You don't have the tacit understanding between close people. How can you fool us? Chen Chen blurted out. Yes, close people. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said. This made both Chang'e and Chenchen blush. But if it's someone else, they won't be able to tell. Mr. Lu next to them was stunned. He stroked his beard and said, "If Xiaohua and Xiaohu's clothes weren't different, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to recognize them." That's good, that's good. Chen smiled and clapped her hands. Seeing that they didn't understand, Chun told them what had happened in the Misty School. Finally, she said, "Senior brother probably has a plan in his heart. So, he came back to see his parents and sister Chang'e and I." In the end, she stole a glance at Zhang Xiaohu and said in a low voice, "Although I didn't ask for your opinion, if I can't avenge senior brother, I will also go with senior brother." Zhang Xiaohua was moved and nodded. She said, "Second sister-in-law, you also have the same idea?" At this point, Chang'e didn't hide it anymore and said with a smile, "We'll support you on the road to the netherworld. You won't be lonely." Zhang Xiaohu had already understood what they meant, but he still felt a little jealous and said, I'm really incompetent. I've made you worry." Zhang Xiaolong clapped. "Good. People often say, husband and wife are birds in the same forest, but when disaster comes, they fly separately. But Xiaohu and his two younger siblings are different. Although they are not husband and wife, they are more like husband and wife. Such love is stronger than gold. It is really admirable." The words, not husband and wife, but better than husband and wife, suddenly made the atmosphere in the central room more ambiguous. Lu Qian glared at him, looked at Chang'e and Chen Chun, who were a little embarrassed, and said, "Now, with our all-powerful brother, everything can be solved. It seems that Xiaohua's martial arts are very high. Let him turn into a little tiger like just now and slap that damn dog until he's looking for his teeth on the ground. Won't that be enough?" Chang'e and Chen Chun also smiled sweetly and said to Zhang Xiaohua, "Then thank you." Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said with a smile, "We're all family. Second sister-in-law, why are you being so polite?" Swish, Chang'e and Chun Chin's faces became hot again. "Xiaohua, I want to do it myself. If it doesn't work, it won't be too late for you to do it." Zhang Xiaohu hesitated and said, "As the gang leader of the Misty School, I can't rely on you to solve everything." Zhang Xiaohua stared at Zhang Xiaohu and said word by word, "Second brother, remember, if you can solve it, I'll definitely let you solve it. If you can't solve it, I'll help you solve it. You only need to be the gang leader of the Misty School, do what you like, and carry forward the legacy of Master O." Zhang Xiaohua's somewhat unreasonable words made Zhang Xiaohu a little embarrassed, but Mr. Lu clapped his hands and said, "Xiaohua's words are quite reasonable. Xiaohu, haven't you heard? A real man knows when to yield and when to stand tall, and a man who is too rigid is easy to break. If you always want to do things beyond your ability, I'm afraid it won't be good." That's right, Xiaohua isn't an outsider. It's better for him to help you than for Nanjingyi to use you. Chang'e said on the side. Zhang Xiaohu smiled. "I just want to solve the problem with my own strength. I didn't say that I wouldn't let Xiaohua help, right? Look at you, why? Why are you all speaking for Xiaohua? Is it because he's the founder of Beidou School? Go." Zhang Xiaohua curled her lips and said, "Let's not talk about it first. Second brother, when do you plan to go back?" "Tomorrow or 2 days later. The appointment with Ming Qing is 7 days." Zhang Xiaohu's matter was settled, and there was no more sorrow in his tone. "That bastard Ming Qing, when I broke into Lingxiang Peak, he used some kind of trap to deceive me." Gao Kunheng also set his sights on the position of the gang leader of the Misty School. "Big brother, you don't have to worry about them. I'll find a way to solve them for you. Don't take too many risks." Zhang Xiaohu said hurriedly, "Nanjingyi of Chuanxiang cult is not to be trifled with. It won't be too late to turn against her when my Misty School has a foundation. According to what you said, Grandmaster Li and the others will be back soon. Ethereal Heights is so small and can't be compared to Shirxin Peak. I'm afraid that our little secret won't last long. It's better to think of a way early." "But, is there a foolproof plan?" Zhang Xiaohu was at his wit's end. Don't worry, I have a good plan." Zhang Xiaohua smiled mysteriously. "However, I have a gift for second brother," Zhang Xiaohua said to Chang'e and Chen Chun, "You two sisters-in-law, rest in Big Brother's yard today. Let me borrow second brother for tonight. Don't talk nonsense. Zhang Xiaohu thought of the way his mother looked at Changa's abdomen and felt a little embarrassed. He hurriedly stopped Zhang Xiaohua from talking nonsense. At this time, it was just afternoon, far from night, but Chang'e and Chen Chun had rushed over overnight and were already tired. In addition, a big weight on their hearts had been lifted, so they could not help but yawn. Seeing this, Lu Qian winked at Guosufei and led the two of them back to the small courtyard. Zhang Kai and Mr. Lu were still chatting in the central room. Zhang Xiaohua took Zhang Xiaohu to the small house and then said to Zhang Xiaolong, who followed them, I have something to do with second brother and can't be disturbed. Big brother, stay outside this house and guard with Ji Xiaohua. Don't let anyone in. Zhang Xiaolong was stunned, then nodded and stood outside the house with Ji Xiaohua. In the small house, Zhang Xiaohua said to Zhang Xiaohu, second brother, how is your practice of ethereal divine skill and plain mental cultivation method? It's very good. Didn't I tell you before? Zhang Xiaohu faintly sensed Zhang Xiaohua's intention and said excitedly, Xiaohua, do you want to, Yes, I wanted to give you the pills when we were at the incense religion, but I was afraid that Abbess Jingyi would find out and harm you. Now that you're in charge of a place and have become the leader of the Misty School, your martial arts, you must be good, otherwise, no one will listen to you. Zhang Xiaohu nodded with deep feelings. Sit cross-legged, like before. Zhang Xiaohua had given Zhang Xiaohu the meridian soothing pill before, so she was familiar with the process. Okay. Zhang Xiaohu sat cross-legged in accordance with her words, his palms facing the sky, and began to operate the ethereal divine skill. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohu was ready, Zhang Xiaohua reached out and took out the jade bottle containing the qi-generating pills. Just as she was about to pour the qi-generating pills out, she changed her mind and put the bottle away. She took out a meridian soothing pill and said with a smile, second brother hasn't taken a meridian soothing pill yet, right? Meridian soothing pill? No, didn't you say that taking it again would have no effect? Zhang Xiaohu honestly replied. In any case, there's no harm. You guys try taking another one. As she spoke, she put a meridian soothing pill into Zhang Xiaohu's mouth. Zhang Xiaohu felt the meridian soothing pill melt in his mouth, transforming into pure internal energy that entered his meridians. He immediately held his breath and concentrated his mind, operating the ethereal divine skill. He refined the internal energy thread by thread, and it slowly flowed into the yin and yang qi in his lower dantian. After 36 circulations were completed, not even 10% of the meridian soothing pill's medicinal power had been refined. Following that, the Suhuan mental cultivation method naturally operated. While continuing to refine the remaining medicinal power, his meridians also produced internal energy at the same time. When the Suhuan mental cultivation method finished 36 circulations, the medicinal power of the meridian soothing pill still hadn't been completely refined. Some of it gradually settled down along with his meridians, but there were still many that slowly wanted to dissipate. Second brother, pay attention. I'll help you. When Zhang Xiaohu heard Zhang Xiaohua's voice, he secretly knew that things weren't good. Sure enough, Zhang Xiaohua sent a wisp of Zhen Qi into his meridians. In his meridians, Zhang Xiaohu's internal energy was like a runaway wild horse, quickly running along his meridians over and over again, one circulatory cycle after another. Zhang Xiaohu's face was a little green. If he hadn't experienced it before, wouldn't he have jumped up already? He didn't know how much time had passed, and he didn't know how many circulations the ethereal divine skill and Suhuan mental cultivation method alternated. Most of the medicinal power of the meridian soothing pill had been refined, turning into pure internal energy that was injected into the black and white qi. Only a small part of it became a thin layer that surrounded the qi. Second brother, try it. How is your skill? Zhang Xiaohua smiled. Okay. Zhang Xiaohu didn't stand on ceremony. He urged the black and white qi to circulate his internal energy. After a little testing, his eyebrows raised in joy. Not bad. It seems to be 4 times stronger than before my dantian was broken. Moreover, the circulation of my internal energy is very smooth. It's not as obscure as before, and there's no feeling of powerlessness. Breaking and then building, it's true. Zhang Xiaohua nodded. Congratulations. second brother. After a great disaster, there's good fortune after good fortune. Presumably, with this kind of cultivation, if you just cultivate, I'm afraid you'll have to wait a few more years? AI, that's right. Zhang Xiaohu sighed. Also, second brother is now cultivating hard and soft cultivation methods, so the effect is doubled. Now, there's still a small part of the medicinal power that hasn't been refined, but you can get better results than before. If the medicinal power of this meridian soothing pill is refined by you, won't your skill be equivalent to 2 meridian soothing pills? And you'll have about 20 years of skill. That much? Zhang Xiaohu was dumbfounded. Who knows, second brother? I'm just guessing. Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and took out a jade bottle from her chest. However, what I know is that just now is only a small plate of pickled vegetables. This is the pancake-rolled river prawns. What is this? Zhang Xiaohu was already used to seeing strange things and said very normally, please vote monthly, please vote recommendation, please bookmark, please tip, thank you. If you like this work, you can come to Qidian.com to vote recommendation or monthly. -4. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.